Welcome to stage 12 of the Tour de France. This is Matthew Keenan with you. The contenders for a podium finish in Paris watched each other yesterday with no major moves. The severity of the course today dictates that there will be changes in the overall standings. Commanding 2 minutes and 52 second lead over TJ Van Garderen. It's in Nairo Quintana at 3 minutes and 9 seconds behind. Valverde, Geraint Thomas, Contador, Galopin, Gesink, Barguil and Mollema make up the top 10. The race for the green jersey, it's Peter Sagan who is back in the lead. It's been a real seesaw battle between he and Andre Greipel. King in the Mountains classification, that is with Chris Froome ahead of his teammate Richie Porte. The white jersey for the best young rider, it is Nairo Quintana ahead of the Frenchman Warren Barguil. Stage 12 from Lamazin through to Plateau de Bay, it's 195 kilometres and is the most difficult of the three stages through the Pyrenees as it hugs the Spanish border. Some believe it's the most difficult of the race. That Category 2 climb to get things started, 2 Category 1 climbs, and then the outside categorization ascent through to the finish line. Live pictures just a few minutes before the peloton rolls away. They'll be leaving the start area at 10 past 11 local time, so just about a minute and a half or so before they leave the start village. They then have around about 5 minutes in the neutral zone before the flag will come in and then the racing will get started. Number 212 at the back, this is Steve Cummings. MTM Quebec, they had a very good day yesterday. Serge Pales, he was sitting second on the road for such a long time. It looked like he was a chance to get that second place finish, but settled for fourth. Kilometre zero, the flag has been waved and it's under the control of Lotto Soudal, who have already started this 20-kilometre lead out for Andre Greipel to get the points in the race for green at the intermediate sprint. I can't imagine that a breakaway will get established within the first 20 kilometres, given that we do have that intermediate sprint. It won't be until after that that there's a chance really for a breakaway to form. And just about 6 kilometres after they go through that sprint point, we see a little climb, which could be the ideal launching pad for today's break. This is Thomas de Gendt on the front now for Lotto Soudal, and nice to see that he doesn't have the bandage on his knee today. Recovering well. Tinkoff Saxo colours sitting down towards the back. That's Rafael Majka, the man who won the stage yesterday. He said that it wasn't originally his plan at the start of the stage to go for the victory, but he attacked once, got in the right move, was watching the other riders, and then got given the all clear by the sports director to continue with it. And Tim Wellens also coming to the front for Lotto Soudal. Their best placed rider overall is the Frenchman Tony Galopin, who sits in 7th position. He's at 4 minutes and 33 seconds behind Chris Froome. And Tony Galopin himself would be the first to concede. He won't be challenging Chris Froome, but he's only a minute and 40 seconds behind second place. So he could potentially be challenging for a top 5 finish, maybe even a podium finish. There's no individual time trial to come in this race. That's behind us. That was on the opening stage in Utrecht. And it was just 13.8 kilometres. And Galopin is climbing as well as he has ever climbed throughout his career. Last year, Tony Galopin from Lotto Soudal, he had a stint in the yellow jersey, just the one day, borrowed the leader's jersey from Vincenzo Nibali, the Italian, and he also picked up a stage victory. This is de Gendt, followed by Adam Hansen. And whilst the yellow has been worn by Chris Froome, and we'd be paying a lot of attention to Froome at the back end of today's stage, the green jersey of Peter Sagan is also just poking his way into the picture. Adam Hansen now. riding at the front for Lotto Soudal. I am strong enough to do my job again, he declared 2 days ago. And he is doing his job straight away. This peloton, no chance to just gently roll into the day. They are already strung out in single file, and you can see the pressure at the rear end of the peloton. Live sport, it is the original reality TV. And Mark Cavendish in the edX Quick-Step colours with the white shoes on. Now in the centre of the picture, just creeping his way towards the front. Still chasing a few points in the battle for green. Cavendish sits in 4th position. He's on 172 points. Peter Sagan leads in the green jersey on 239. In second place is Andre Greipel. He's just 7 points behind. As Peter Sagan, he's always got the smile on his face. Rides up alongside Mark Cavendish. Just says good morning. The earliest point of today's stage where you will see an attack from the peloton is at 20.1 kilometres. Immediately after that intermediate sprint, I anticipate that we'll see the first attempt of riders to try and break away. Tim Wellens now sitting on the front for the Belgian outfit, supporting the German sprinter Andre Greipel. 2 stage wins in this race for the big German. 33 years of age today, looking to get himself the birthday present by moving back into that green jersey. And for him to do that, he needs to win this intermediate sprint and have Peter Sagan finish in 4th place or worse. So they are the numbers for Andre Greipel. It looked like Michael Rogers going to the front for Tinkoff Saxo. Up to the front to offer some support for Peter Sagan. It would be wise, surely, if Tinkoff Saxo now, given the deficit that Alberto Contador has in the overall standings, plus the lack of legs that he showed in that first Pyrenean stage. Contador at 6th overall, 4 minutes and 4 seconds down. Given that situation with their team leader, surely Tinkoff Saxo now provides some support for Peter Sagan in the race for the green jersey. They got the stage win yesterday with Rafael Majka, who won the King of the Mountains jersey last year, and has said that he's not going to race for that classification again this year. His main role will still be to support Alberto Contador. De Gendt still sits to the front with Lars back behind him. Cavendish with one red jersey sitting behind him. That's Jens Debusschere, a former Belgian national champion who has signed a 2-year contract extension with Lotto Soudal. There's Adam Yates, number 108. Can he find his legs once again in the mountains today? Unfortunately, his brother, Simon, his twin brother, has been a little bit under the weather. De Gendt swings out of the way. Underneath the kite, 1 kilometre remaining. Feels as if it could be the stage victory at stake with this lead out from Lotto Soudal. And you get a real appreciation for the tempo when you look at the long line of riders, single file at the rear end of the peloton. Dowsett, a former world hour record holder. He's a man with plenty of horsepower, and even he is showing the signs of being under pressure. Here comes Giant Alpecin, doing the job for Degenkolb. It is Sagan in green with Degenkolb behind him, followed by Greipel. It's then Cavendish. Jens Debusschere is the rider that sits behind Mark Cavendish, perhaps trying to poach a few of the remaining points to make for maximum gains for Andre Greipel. The big German goes on the left. He gets over the top of Peter Sagan. He'll be collecting 20 points. Sagan fighting on for second, perhaps third, as Degenkolb pushes through for second place. As for the impact on the race for the green jersey, let's just take another look at it. The turner's speed, Greipel is proving clearly to be the fastest sprinter in this year's race. Does Sagan hold on for second? No, he doesn't. Degenkolb gets there, but only just. It was then Cavendish in 4th place. So Peter Sagan will hold on to the green jersey by 2 points. And immediately through the intermediate sprint, we've got the attack. And it has come from Brian Cocker of Europcar, along with Louis Vestre from Astana. And Brian Cocker is a rider that we might have anticipated would get in amongst that intermediate sprint. Cocker, the young Frenchman, he sits in 5th position in the race for the green jersey. And he's shown himself to be a very quick finisher, particularly when things are going slightly uphill. Now he wants to prove himself as a reasonable climber. Now racing towards the first climb of the day, the Col de Port d'Aspet. It's a Category 2 climb. The Cathedral of St. Mary. A church that dates back to 1304, at least that's when they started to build this church, and the Gothic church was completed in 1350. Nicely perched at the top of the hill. Here's the Dutchman, Louis Vestre, who was in the breakaway on the stage across the Pavé on stage 4. When Astana were hatching a plan to see whether Vincenzo Nibali, the defending champion, could take some time on his main rivals, just as he did the previous year across the Pavé. It looks like it could be Louis Meintjes coming across from MTM Quebecer. Wait until we get a slightly closer look. That was a long-range call. We'll wait until he's much closer. They had a big day yesterday with Serge Pals in the breakaway. Surely the Belgian couldn't do it 2 days in a row. Greipel, Degenkolb, Sagan, Cavendish, Duboucher, and then Vestre, followed by Cocker, De Kort, and Curvers. It was then Ede, Sika, Iverti, Durasac, Ladanu, and Vokler, the top 15 through that intermediate sprint. And the Cofidis squad also trying to come across to the breakaway. And the young South African Louis Meintjes has managed to make it across to this leading group. That is a good performance by the 23-year-old in his first Tour de France. He was proudly wearing the colours of the South African national champion last year when he rode the Volta a España. Vestre and Cocker. So the Netherlands, France and South Africa represented at the front. Here comes Meintjes, the 23-year-old from Pretoria. The second place finisher at the World Championships in 2013. It was in the under-23 road race. It was around Florence on what was a very demanding circuit. Early in his career showing himself as a very strong climber. Today we'll get to find out even just how good he is on the big mountains. We'll learn a little bit more about him. Unfortunately, because of the length of today's stage and a small problem with one of the aircraft that flies over the top of the race, we're not getting the transmission from race radio. So the time gaps could take a little while to come through. Another split. This is a big split. There's a large group trying to go across. And Romain Bardet is there. That's the rider in the white colours who now goes through to the front. Bardet, it was such a disappointing day yesterday. He tried to get into the early breakaway. Jakob Fuglsang is also there for Astana. This is Jerome Capel from IM Cycling. Frenchman with the Swiss team. And FDJ, it's not Thibaut Pinot, unfortunately for them, the rider they would have hoped for. Bardet indicating, let's get organised. The world champion, Mikhail Kwiatkowski, trying to fly the flag for NX Quickstep, making sure that they're represented. A scurrying of other teams also looking to get to the front. Teammates of Chris Froome, they are playing the role of the policeman at this point, sitting at the front, assessing the size of the group and the numbers that are going forward in terms of the dossards that are being worn on the jerseys. Who's going up the front? What does that mean for the rest of the stage, and how dangerous are they? They'll be paying very close attention to any riders that move forward from Movistar. They won't want to give Alejandro Valverde or Nairo Quintana too many launching pads. It's been a very quick first 25 kilometres. And whilst we pay attention to the front of the race, spare a thought for the man who sits in at last position in the general classification, Michael Matthews. He's 2 hours, 4 minutes and 14 seconds behind overall. And a lot is made of the Lanterne Rouge, the last rider in the general classification at the Tour. But Michael Matthews has said that he's not enjoying sitting in last position overall. Meintjes, Vestra, Coquard. Showing great versatility, number 122. He was one of the hopes for the French in the sprint stages. This is Purito Rodriguez. A man with loads of courage. And there is one rider here from Movistar, and this is Gorka Izagirre that's made the break. Movistar laying down the foundations perhaps for an attack today from their team leader, Nairo Quintana. Mikel Chiral is in the move for AG2R Le Mondial, along with Romain Bardet. This is Mathieu Ladenu from FDJ, one of the riders from the local region. Coquard, the going is a little bit too tough for him. This is an uncategorised climb. This is just a little lump in the road by comparison of what is still to come. Star Romain Bardet. It's gone pear-shaped, that part of the plan. They're hunting stage victories now, and they've already won one. And that was to the Mur de Bretagne with Alexis Villemors. Danny Navarro in the red colours for Cofidis. They haven't won a stage since 2008. This is Rodriguez. Bardet is the next rider to come through. 3 riders in the break for AG2R Le Mondial, so they'll be very pleased. 2 for Europcar, Brian Coquard, who was the original rider to break away, along with Louis Vestra and Louis Meintjes. Who, of the 2 riders from Europcar, is the best suited to today's stage. Still those 2 riders stuck in the middle, Seberg and Tulik, at 2 minutes behind. And then it's 4 minutes back to the main peloton. At this point, their thinking is surely, well, let's just continue to ride, go through the motions, and then at the very least, we'll get a head start before we hit that first big climb of the day. The Col de Porte d'Aspet, a Category 2 climb. They'll start that climb with a 4-minute advantage over the peloton. They'll probably be caught by the top, but they'll have ridden at their own pace, saved a little bit of energy along the way. Frederic Brun at the back of the group for Breton Séché, along with Jan Barter from Bora Argon 18. Just about onto the climb now of the Col de Porte d'Aspet, and we won't be too far away from seeing the memorial to Fabio Casatelli, the young Italian who passed away on the descent of this climb some 20 years ago. Out to 6 minutes and 12 seconds now. Quality riders in that leading group, they do stand a chance of being able to survive. If Rodriguez and Bardet can somehow find better legs than what they arrived at the start line with yesterday. Still Rowe and Stannard sitting at the front for Team Sky. And Luke Rowe, despite being the youngest rider on the Sky team, is one of the most vocal. The youngest of those, at least, that are at this year's Tour de France, of course. Not the youngest on the entire Sky team. This is Izagirre for Movistar. Can't help but think that they are hatching a plan for a move from Nairo Quintana, who was said perhaps to claw back some of that 3-minute deficit that he has on Chris Froome. He needs to try a long-distance attack. Unfortunately for Nairo Quintana, today's penultimate climb, between the top of the second last climb and the bottom of the final climb to the finish line, there's a really long valley road, and that will very much work against him. And the reports are at this point it's a slight headwind along that valley road as well. Well, Andy Schleck tried that move on the stage to the Galibier back in 2011. It worked for him. He did gain some time on his major rivals, including Contador and Cadel Evans. It wasn't enough for Andy Schleck to go on to win the Tour de France, but it did secure him a spot on the podium, where eventually he would finish in second position with his brother Frank in third place. And it's hard to believe that Andy Schleck is already retired. At the ripe old age of 29, he retired. This is Alex Dowsett, one of the many riders still somehow trying to recuperate from the many crashes throughout the first week. Steven Kruijswijk in the yellow colours of Lotto NL Jumbo. They'll be hoping for a big ride today from their team leader, Robert Geesink. Geesink sits in 8th position overall at 4 minutes and 35 seconds down. There was a bit of a race yesterday between the Dutch. We saw an attack from Bauke Mollema with a few kilometres remaining. That moved him up into the top 10, which has him as the second best Dutchman. The best Dutchman at this point is Robert Geesink. Those two are good mates, former teammates. They get along well, but they're not teammates anymore. You just saw the graphic with the temperatures on the screen, and it is desperately hot. Back to the leading group of 22. This is Jeremy Waugh, who now comes through to the front for FDJ. He had a second place finish on a stage in the Tour de France in this region through the Lords back in 2010, when it was Thor Hushovd who won the stage. Possibly the best win at the Tour de France in the career of Thor Hushovd, and he won a few stages, but that one through the mountains was an extraordinary performance by the big Norwegian. As for Jeremy Waugh, a former engineering student, he was just about in tears. He's one of the most interesting riders in the peloton, Jeremy Waugh.
So a nice round of applause from the crowd here as we continue our way up the Col de la Cour, and the peloton are just accepting the escort from Team Sky. I think everybody in the peloton are going to go head to head on the last climb of the day, Paul, and they're allowing the group up front to gain time now. 8:21, yeah. And there's only 16 left up front.
Yes, I'm a little bit surprised by the fact that they've allowed that breakaway group to stretch its advantage to 8 minutes and 22 seconds, but you can obviously see Team Sky doing the job that they have to. They're the team of the overall leader, Chris Froome. They're stamping out the pace at the front end of the field, but the fact that that gap is starting to get up towards the magical 10-minute mark, it could well mean that now the favour is actually going towards the advantage of the breakaway group, and they may now start to feel they've got a chance of a stage victory today.
That's what Joaquin Rodriguez is hoping. He's still in the forward 16 riders. We've got some good riders have gone out of that back, including the world champion Mikhail Kwiatkowski. He's been dropped. So we pick up the rear of the race. Steve Cummins, the British rider on the MTN Quebecer team at the back there, 212. But you can tell the fact that there's nobody tailing out of the back just now, that the peloton are not in an angry mood. They are respecting the last day in the High Pyrenees, because they know at the very end of the stage today there is an absolute brute of a climb.
Well, I think with the reduction of numbers in that leading group, it's gone down from 22 just to 16 riders leading the race. I think we'll start to see, once we go over the top of this climb, the Col de la Cour, we'll see a little bit more of a cohesive group at the front, start to collaborate a bit more on the two climbs in between the Col de la Cour and the next climb of the day, the Col de l'Ers. Well, that's Jakob Fuglsang over on the right-hand side for Astana. His teammate on the left was Louis Vestre. Just sitting on the back here was number 12, and that's Romain Bardet. He's 20th overall, and Michael Kwiatkowski was in a spot of bother early on, but he's managed to recover and get himself back into this group. Kwiatkowski had a pretty good start to the year. In fact, he popped out with a very interesting victory in the prologue of the Paris-Nice race, an 8-day race in the start of the year around about the month of March. He finished second overall in that, and he just lost out down towards the end of the race when he was beaten in the individual time trial, and he lost out there to Richie Porte, who won the final time trial and took the overall victory. Richie Porte wears the polka dot jersey here as the leader of the King of the Mountains competition. He's actually borrowed it from Chris Froome, because Froome leads that competition by 17 points. This is one of the sprinters, one of the big sprinters, and this of course is John Degenkolb. He's a man who's been knocking on the door of a victory. He's in third place in the green jersey points classification, but he's now almost 53 points behind his compatriot, behind Peter Sagan and his compatriot André Greipel. It's a very difficult day today as the riders keep going up and down, and I think the days of accumulated fatigue are starting to play not only in that leading group of riders, which looks to be a lot more than 16 riders now. I think a couple more have managed to recover after the initial acceleration coming.
They must have slowed down,
Vistra.
Paul, because Frederick Brunner's come back, and so too has Kwiatkowski.
Yeah, I think after the initial acceleration coming from Louis Vistra, there was that splitting up, and then very strange things happen on the early slopes of a climb like this, because Le Danu has come back from FDJ as well.
Yeah, and the only man missing now from the original 22 is Christophe Riblon, which is a little bit surprising.
Well, it is, Phil. We're looking here at Brian Coquart. He also was caught out in the early couple of kilometres. I think just the nasty acceleration over the first few kilometres of this climb put one or two riders into difficulty. And once they started to get their rhythm, they realised, I've got to try, I've got to get myself back into this group, because there's still an awful long way to go. And they managed to find the rhythm and reintegrate the group.
Well, it's having no effect on the peloton, because they're still 8 3/4 minutes now behind. And so this breakaway is reformed at the front without one rider. So back to 21 men up here now.
Yes, and I think again that will slightly go against their chances, although the clock is not reflecting that, because the clock is creeping up to almost a 9-minute advantage, and that corresponds to just about 6 kilometres, the distance between them. That was David Bramati in the Etixx Quick-Step car there, just to looking after his world champion. Kwiatkowski concentrating on the day, making sure that Etixx Quick-Step have got a man in the breakaway on a day like this, and their sleeper, the man that we were expecting to slowly creep up the overall standings, Rigoberto Urán. Well, he had a pretty difficult day yesterday. He lost a fair amount of time, and he started to slip down in the overall standings.
The world champion has come back to the leaders. He's been back to chat with David Bernardi in the team car as well. But they have slowed down, although the clock is saying they're still holding their own as they're getting up towards the summit. This should be 5 kilometres to go for the riders. It is on the climb to the Col de la Cour. All back together except one. Christophe Riblon is the rider who has not come back.
Well, as you think about it, Phil, the tale of woes seems to continue there for Team AG2R Le Mondial, having lost 2 riders on yesterday's stage.
Hi, welcome on Radio Tour from race direction car number 2, just behind the pack, and we have had extremely hot conditions on the race so far. The temperatures went up to 37 degrees Celsius. 37 degrees Celsius on the pack. The good news is that we have clouds now on the pack. The bad news is that those clouds could become thunderstorms.
Well, in fact, it would even seem that Christophe Riblon is recovering a little bit, because he's also been announced at being only 20 seconds behind the leading group of 21 riders. So from that severe split-up that started with the big accelerations at the bottom, it looks as if everybody is now beginning to recover. Once they go over the top, they will drop down into the valley. Then they'll have quite a long ride along the valley floor to head themselves up to the next climb of the day, which, again, the climbs seem to be getting more and more difficult as the stage progresses. The next climb is another first category climb, the Col de la Porte de l'Est, which is 13 kilometers long and an average gradient of just inside of 6%. They go over the Col de la Cour, they drop down into the town of Seix, then through the small town of Oust, then into Massat, through Le Port, and then they start the Port de l'Est. And that's when I think we'll start to see a little change in attitude coming from Team Sky, because I just have it in the back of my mind today that just because of the nature and the reputation of the Plateau de Bay, Team Sky would like to respect the traditions of the sport and have a big set to between the overall contenders, and they'll be looking to see if there's any weakness in Nairo Quintana, but all of the other riders too who are lined up behind Chris Froome, the Nairo Quintana, TJ Van Garderen, Alberto Contador, they will all be looking to see if there's any weakness in Team Sky and any weakness in Chris Froome, and if they can see a slight possibility, they'll go for the jugular.
They will, but I think it's still going to go to the finishing climb. You've got to attack on the finishing climb just to stay upright, because it's so steep and they're going to hit each other for sure. And I think if that happens, they're going to gamble till then and stay together. So that's why the breakaway might have a chance of surviving to the line today. That's their tactic. They played the card, they've gambled on the peloton concentrating on one another, and so those with a little bit of hope and a bit of lost time, they've decided now might be a good day to go for the win.
Well, there's always a chance as well for the riders we talked about, Phil. The best placed riders in that leading group are Fulsang, Rodriguez and Bardet. For them, it's always a chance, as sometimes during the Tour de France you get a free card, a free 10-minute advantage over the main field. And for those riders, if they were to be able to do that, they'd replace themselves with hopes of a high finish in the overall standings at the end of the 3 weeks.
Pacemaker on the breakaway, Sylvain Chavanel. He's been a 3-time stage winner in the Tour de France in the past, and I believe his contract is up this year with IM Cycling, and he hasn't got a new one just yet. There's a reference to a great bike rider of the past, Laurent Jalabert, and they love him apparently, and he's now a television commentator with French television. You can see a little bit of water on the camera lens here, and I don't think it's water from the riders' bidons. I think it is actually starting to spot with rain.
Well, there has been a little bit of a cloudburst, just looking at the dampness on the surface. Now that makes these Pyrenean descents very precarious. I have to say that Louis Meintjes is rather happily ensconced into this breakaway group. You know, he was he's had quite an impressive season. We saw him ride races like the Dauphiné. He finished 8th overall in the Tour of Trentino earlier on, and I think the team felt with having him in the Tour de France, they would allow him freedom on a couple of days like this. Again, like a lot of the young riders, they don't want to really ruin their chances of a long and illustrious career, so they don't want to put too much pressure on them to try and stay in contact on every big mountain stage. It's a question here of really learning the ropes.
Huge talent. He's the rider in black on though. He's just gone off our shot there, but he's got a real chance today, and that would be a result. 105.5 kilometres left to ride. The breakaway is reformed, except without Christophe Riblon, who has dropped. There is rain on our camera lens now, so the forecasters of a storm mid-afternoon may prove to be correct here, as they're getting a bit of rain on the climb of the Col de la Cour, and as a result that group of 21 is more than holding their own. They've pushed it out to 8 minutes 45.
And in fact, one of the riders who was in difficulty just a few moments ago, Christophe Riblon, he seems to have also recovered. He's one of the older riders in that leading group, winner of a stage back in 2010 in the Pyrenees, is also just about 20 seconds off the back end of that group, so fingers crossed for him that he makes contact before we go over the summit of the Col de la Cour.
Well, it's quite clear the main field here are preoccupied by the finishing climb today. It's not to Chris Froome and his Sky team to launch an attack. It's up to the other riders to try and get rid of him. And I think they're waiting for a showdown on the Plateau de Bay when they get there. It's a very, very steep climb, and just on the climb itself, you can gain huge amounts of time.
Well, you can. It's a massive climb. It's a real tough one as well. And you get a chance here just to see that the road surfaces as well. The road surfaces are always very different between the Alpine passes and the Pyrenean passes, although the final few kilometers of the Plateau de Bay have been resurfaced and they've got a very smooth tarmac surface in the last 4 or 5 kilometers, which makes it, if you like, just slightly easier than it might have been 12 months ago. There's Meintjes on the left-hand side there, the rider we were just telling you about. A huge talent for the future of the sport. This year is the All-African Road Racing Champion. 3rd in the National Time Trial Championships a couple of years ago when he was just 21 years of age. And that was in 2013. He was 2nd place in the World Under-23 Road Racing Champion. A huge talent, I'd have to say, for the future of South African cycling. Simja sitting there now further back. Well, they've got it locked in now. They allowed a couple of minutes advantage to creep into their advantage. It's now it went up to 8 minutes and 45 seconds, but now with much of that pacemaking being done there on the front, well, they're just having a quick glimpse. There is Christophe Riblon, so he now has also managed to get back into the leading group of riders. So it's back to the old status quo, 22 riders in the lead.
Yeah, well, they've all come back together and they're still gaining time on the peloton, so we'll see. It's just come slightly down a little bit now, 8:26, as they've gone back together up the front. Remember, we're heading up to the summit of the Col de la Cour now, which is the first of 2 first category climbs today. Marcel Seeberg, who normally sits in front of Andre Greipel, who's 33 today, by the way, has now dropped back to 7:15. He's actually decided to wait at last and let the group catch him.
Well, I think that would be a very sensible decision as well, Phil. You don't want to sit in no man's land on a day like this, but I suppose it can be a nice day off, as he's only about a minute now in front of the main field, so very shortly he'll be in contact with the rest of the lads. Ian Stannard, huffing and puffing at the front. You can recognise him with the Union flag around his sleeve, former British national champion. He didn't ride the Tour de France last year because he was trying to recover from a very, very nasty accident in the Ghent-Wevelgem race.
Yes, and he's such a valued part of the Sky team, as we've seen. Now we're looking across at the Mont Vallier at the moment.
Yes, 2,800 meters in altitude. In fact, you can see this from the plains of the Garonne and also right away from Toulouse. Apparently the legendary first bishop of Couserans, around about 452, is said to have climbed up to the summit of this mountain.
That's a little bit of hint on the north side, north-facing walls of the snow not quite melting away in the month of July here. And it won't be too long before it starts to return as we get towards the end of the summer. But the rain is just spitting out there just now. It's not raining too heavily. Let's hope as they move through the Pyrenees today, they move away from these storms, which will be unpredictable, I think, all the way to the finish. And that finishing time, Paul, climb rather, the leaders are going to have to attack each other, and they'll try to find out, is Froome up for the job?
Well, they've got to look every time. Nairo Quintana, you can in fact start to see the rain starting to come down just a little bit. Now that's going to make it a little bit scary on the descents, but I think Nairo Quintana, we've seen him win the Giro d'Italia, we've seen him finish 2nd overall in the Tour de France. I think he has to try and make a move on every mountaintop finish in this year's Tour. And he knows that, and I think he's had an ideal preparation. The team have given him the confidence to allow him to prepare in the way that he wanted to. He started off the season racing in Europe. Then he went back to Boyacá in Colombia. He said, I don't have to train at altitude in hotels like the rest of these guys. I can just stay at home with my wife and family. He's just, in fact, got a 1-year-old who was born towards the middle of last year. And so he stayed at home in Boyacá, trained at altitude. We're looking now at just over 2 kilometers to go to the top of the climb. Priedler of Bora, he was in the lead just over the first climb. Just looking there a little bit at every opportunity, especially whenever the race goes uphill.
But the breakaway today, and this is Bardet at the front here, is 8:35, the gap, and they could have played the ace cards today, this breakaway. We'll know more when they get over the top of the next climb, the Porte de l'Ers. which leaves us still about 51 kilometers to race, including the final climb of the day. So they're not home by any means safe and sound yet. We continue on the descent here.
Well, you know, because of the fact that we've got this little film of rain coming down and making the road damp, this is an ideal opportunity to really split the group. This, in fact, looks to me as if it's not Bardet, Phil, it's Kerel and Sepp Van Mark who've managed to stretch a slight advantage. Bardet's just a little bit further back in that second group.
Very similar face, I must say. Michael Kerel here. And Sepp Van Mark, normally a man for the classics, one-day races, but coming down here at the moment in the breakaway. Temperature, as they drop down again, is going back up. When the rain started, it dropped quite dramatically very quickly, but it's got climbing back up to 32, it says. Humidity is decreasing, and the gap is holding at 8:38. 55 miles to go, down through the towns, halfway down the Col de la Cour here.
There's some pretty tricky little towns now that we start to make our way through, and I think this will, as we go through Seix, number 09 is the département down here as well, the department of the Ariège. Little indication going there, they want everybody to work, and this is the damage that's been done just because of the tricky nature of this descent.
They might well come back together. They're racing down to near the town of Ust, and that's where the feeding station is. It's only about 3 kilometers away. Taking no chances here, these beautiful Pyrenean towns. Nowhere to park your car, of course. As we charge through the streets, 8:41, nudging forward again here.
Well, it's a good situation to be in a breakaway on a day like this, because there'll be a lot of nervousness in the main field behind. I'm just having a quick look back to see there. You can see Bardet coming up to the group. So Bardet was being attentive. Louis Meintjes as well there, just popping on the back in the black and white jersey of Team NTN Qhubeka.
And Kwiatkowski's up and down like a yo-yo. He's now caught the leaders, come back to them, the world champion. We've got 7 of them getting back together. The rest of the breakaway has still got them in their sights at 8:41, so there's still a chance there'll be a regrouping again of this breakaway as they head out towards the next climb.
Well, Jérôme Coppel is the rider from IAM Cycling who was caught out on that descent. Most of the control being done here. This looks like Luc Rowe coming forward once again. They're obviously the 2 riders who've been designated by Team Sky to set the pace making, and they're not really pushing it too hard. And you can see just how tricky these corners are. You've got to be very, very careful. A lot of riders will be keeping a close eye on Chris Froome. There in the second row, you've got the red and black jerseys, that's TJ Van Garderen, and then the yellow jerseys, that's going to be Alberto Contador, never far away. Watch out for the white jersey on the shoulders of Nairo Quintana. I think he's going to unleash a pretty violent attack when we come to this final climb of the day today.
Eight minutes 50, and the breakaway trying to get back together again with Marcel Seeberg. We've never seen hide nor hair of him other than on the graphics which you're seeing, and he's in no man's land. Has been there virtually ever since the breakaway established. He got close but not close enough, and there's a couple of Sepp Van Mark there, missed his bag and dropped all his bottles, and they're very, very dangerous, those bottles, when they're in the road like that. So when the breakaway's gone through, they'll quickly move those, but he's missed his drinks and he won't be too happy about that. This is now on the front is Louis Meintjes here, the young South African cyclist on the MTN Qhubeka team, looking very cool in this breakaway.
Well, I think very happy with the race situation. He knows he's not a danger in the overall classification, but today he's learning what the Tour de France is all about, learning about the big mountain stages. And when I spoke to the team management before the start of this race, they said he was going to be given a little bit of a free hand, and if he lost some time in the early part of the Tour de France, he'd look for a nice breakaway situation like this. And I have to say, for the moment, it's looking rather good.
See how he climbs. He's been a former runner-up in the World Under-23 Championship back in 2013. He is in the development stage. He's only 23 now, and he is a real star of the future. There he is, right in the middle with his black and white stripes on. He's not at all overawed by the company he's keeping here. as they've now taken on their drinks, all except Sepp van Mark, although he seems to have something there. He's drinking out of a bottle. .8:57. They're still pushing 9 minutes now, Paul. I can't imagine that they're going to be brought back with 84 kilometres to ride. You just don't know. It all depends how the main field climb the next first category mountain. If they get over the top of that with something like 7 or 8 minutes, then they will stay away to the finish. Good climbers in this group it's catching up, including Joaquim Rodriguez and Romain Bardet, and also Louis Meintjes here, the young South African in his first tour, is in that chase group. And if that group gets together, they'll go down to the Plateau de Bay for sure.
Well, that's what they're looking to do, and despite the fact that we've seen the climbers of Team Sky come to the front end of the main peloton, they're not really making that gap tumble quite as quickly as they would like to. And look at the face here on Michael Kwiatkowski, the world champion on the front. He's almost in a time trialing position here as he gets up towards the top of the climb.
5 kilometres for the peloton, which continues to reduce in size, but they haven't all. Leader in the King of the Mountains there, 2:19, Daniel Techner-Hymenot. Oh, what's this? Christophe Perrault has just suddenly locked up the man that was second in the Tour last year.
Well, when things start to go wrong, they really go seriously wrong in a race like the Tour de France. He blew when we saw the first big mountain climb. He had a difficult day yesterday. JC Perrault, as his nickname is, he finished in second place overall in the Tour de France last year, and he's not enjoying this one, Phil.
He tried desperately to hold on to that group, but the pace has lifted itself just a notch too far at 5 kilometres to go. His legs have literally given up there with the leaders. We're a kilometre from the top. And the two leaders, I think, are still just around the corner. They're not quite with those two leaders yet.
No, but you can see the work that's being done by the two riders from AG2R. Isn't it funny? They've got an AG2R rider at the back of the race, JC Perrault, having a very, very difficult day. The two riders we're looking at here are trying to put some hope back into AG2R, the French team, who finished well up overall last year.
Dan Martin, our hero of yesterday, wearing the red numbers, the most aggressive rider yesterday. He looks as though he too is being put under pressure coming up to the top of the climb.
Well, it's not surprising, Phil. He's got to pay for those incredible efforts that he made yesterday. I mean, he rode across a 3-minute gap on the Col d'Aspin. That in itself was an impressive performance. Then he did almost the same thing over the top of the Col de Tourmalet and got himself up into second place on the stage. So at the end of the day, you have to pay your accounts.
Well, Jens, we're nearly at the top with the leaders, and the gap is still over 10 minutes. Now, what's the chances if that little two front groups merge for Joaquim Rodriguez? Jens, we're just talking about the gap of 10 minutes as they come over the top of the climb, not quite there. What's the chances now of that group staying away, A, and B, the possibility of Rodriguez getting away to win?
Well, they brought back 3 minutes. They still have a few kilometers to climb, so they might bring it back down to 9 minutes. It's still within range, but just. So it's going to come down really to the last kilometers of to see if the breakaway riders have enough power and strength left in legs. I mean, don't forget, they have the whole day out there in their legs already, so they're going to be a lot more tired than the fresh riders coming off the peloton. So I still think it's going to be a close game, but they're going to get caught.
Who's going to be first to attack from the peloton, Jens, because there's still the race to beat Froome?
Well, it looks like that Movistar, they don't have a rider in contact anymore with that first group of riders here, so they are just doomed to attack. They just have to attack, otherwise they have a day without anything today. So yeah, they just gotta go with all their force.
Jensi, what I can't understand is right now why Movistar still haven't yet come to the front. So they've got an ideal situation with Gorka Izagir in the leading group further up the road.
Yeah, I thought about that, and you know, maybe they know something inside the team which they haven't told us yet. You know, maybe Quintana doesn't feel good, maybe he feels a little sick, maybe he, you know, it's, I don't know, there's a lot of ways to speculate, but maybe they do know more than we do. But yes, they should start working harder now.
Well, at the moment, we've just seen Kwiatkowski go over the summit, and for the second time today, Sepp van Mark miss a drink. He's dropped the bottles again as he goes over in second place. Now, I would think that very shortly now the groups will merge here, and the race is on to get to the bottom of the plateau.
Well, it certainly is, and I think the interesting thing as well is the fact in this second group on the road, the Les Coureurs Français make us dream, and that was the sign just towards the side of the road there, and I would think the French spectators are hoping that AG2R will make them dream, because they've got two strong riders in the second group on the road there, and of course Michael Kirel, who is a Breton in AG2R, he's riding his heart out for Romain Bardet, so I think Romain Bardet, after his early difficulties in the Tour de France, may be climbing back into a good day.
It looks like he's recovered anyway, and that's a good sign for the French. And if he can pick up even 8 minutes, 7 minutes at the finish, he will put himself in a top 20 place in the Tour de France. And of course, the Alps are still to come, and it's a hard journey through the Alps.
Just might have noticed there, Phil, just how much Michael Kwiatkowski, who got himself maximum points at the top of that climb, is using the road. He now realises now's the time to try and open up the lead on this descent over the group that contains all of the climbers.
We'll wait to see the peloton over the top now, but it's still over 10 minutes at the moment. And Kwiatkowski, well, this is how he rushed away to win his World Championship in the end. He flew off the mountains in Spain. But I think the man doing the ride for me is Sepp van Markpool. He's never excelled even in the one-day hilly classics, and here he is in the Pyrenees.
Yeah, but this is the Tour. He's had a little bit of pressure taken off his shoulders, but just watch how well these riders negotiate the corners. Kwiatkowski in first position moves over to the far side.
Oh, Michael Scott Michele Scarponi is gone. I thought for a moment we were just tuning into Nibali, but no, it's Scarponi, his teammate. And as we look at the peloton, it's still a big peloton that we're taking to the top of this climb.
Thiago Machado is the rider on the back there for Katusha. He's a pretty good climber in his own right, and I think today he's throwing over all of his hopes to his teammate, who is in the second group on the road with those other climbers, and that of course Joaquim Rodriguez. And what a coup that would be for him to get a second stage victory in this year's Tour. Well, just looking now at the organizer, I can every now and again I just spot Alejandro Valverde and Nairo Quintana just hovering around there. I have to say, what a great ride by Daniel Tekla-Heimanot, number 219. He always looks in a little bit of difficulty, sitting at the back of the group, but he hasn't been left behind just yet. And in fact, he's sitting on the back wheel of a rider who's high in the overall standings. Tony Galopin, just in front of him there, wearing number 71. Galopin is 7th place overall. He's riding exceptionally well so far. He's 4 minutes and 33 seconds off as we go back to the leaders. I'm not quite sure that that's 36. This is more like it, 55 kilometers an hour. He looks over his shoulder, Kwiatkowski. He will take some serious risks on this descent. He knows that if he can build up a minute or a minute and a half advantage over the climbers behind, that they're going to start to take at least an option on the possibility of a victory on today's stage. Again, their chance to see the speed of 54 kilometers an hour. It's the other thing that's very important when you go downhill fast like this is to make sure going into some of these corners, Phil, that you've got your gears lined up properly. You don't want to be in too big a gear because you can't accelerate away. You've got to drop it down a couple of gears coming into these hairpin bends so you can pick it up to high speed quickly.
Oh, well, look at these pictures now, Paul. These are coming in from the finishing area on the Plateau de Bay. It is absolutely pouring down. It is hailstones and it's ice cold. How the weather has changed in a couple of hours, but the only good news is the storm might well pass before the riders come here. These are the two leaders. They're still on reasonably dry roads. They look dry anyway, and they've got the sun out at the moment. I've just heard Sylvain Chavanel, who was in the breakaway, has gone over the top of the climb, over 4 minutes behind these two riders. Peloton still going up the climb at the minute. They're inside 10 minutes now.
Well, they are, but at the front, Michael Kwiatkowski, as we look up at the dark grey clouds, really is taking lots of risks. This is the back end of the main field. Phil, hats off to Daniel Tekla-Heimer, not there in the MTN Quebecer jersey. He's doing an excellent job riding in the Tour de France for the first time. He's in survival mode in these big mountains, but he's probably very happy with the fact that he's got a teammate, Louis Meintjes, in the second group on the road. Now, who knows what could happen? There's Meintjes. You can see him in the black and white jersey there of MTN Quebec, and so many people have said, just watch out for this guy because he is a very, very good climber. And he rode exceptionally well in a race that was dominated in June by Chris Froome and Alberto Contador and all the rest. And not Contador, but by Chris Froome and Vincenzo Nibali. But Meintjes was right up there alongside them, and he wasn't scared at all of their reputations.
Now the fine descending by Kwiatkowski has actually pulled them away there. It looked as though we were going to merge at the top of the climb, but right now these two have no intention of waiting for that chase group, because there are two good climbers in there and they don't want them to rejoin. We're riding beneath the possibility of a storm here towards the top of this climb right now, because the clouds are coming across the Pyrenees. This is the peloton at 9:55 as they continue towards the summit. Situation is those two leaders are being chased by 7 riders at approximately 66 seconds. The field itself is losing ground again, and it's now gone back to 10 minutes 28, and there we have it. We've got Chris Froome in second place behind the British champion, his teammate Peter Kenyon. These look like the legs here of Daniel Tekla-Heimer, and he's been hanging on to the back of this very select chase peloton.
Well, I'll tell you what, Phil, you've got to tip your hat to him, I think, because yes, he has been sitting at the back end of the main field, but there's a lot of riders being left behind on a day like this, and let's not forget this is the first man to wear the leader's jersey in the Kingdom Mountains for Eritrea. I think MTN will be very happy about that, but put all of that behind you, because in the chase group further up the road, and almost 9.5 minutes up the road from Daniel Tekla-Heimer is his teammate Louis Meintjes.
Well, look at this little warning there from Peter Kenyon saying take it easy on this bend, there's water on it, and wisely guiding their leader down. Sky all around Chris Froome to keep him out of trouble as best they can. Once we get onto the Plateau de Dubai, then I reckon they'll release him, and anybody that can go with him will have to do their best.
Well, Daniel Bramati is the team manager in the Etix Quick Step car, coming up alongside the breakaway group there. And one of the reasons to ride alongside and give a little bit of information like this is just to give a good show for the win.
So Kenyuk, Chris Froome now moved him right to the front to keep him away from any possible falls on the road which goes in and out. It depends where they are. All of the contenders that are challenging Chris Froome are in this group. Nobody has been left behind, not even Vincenzo. He lost time yesterday, but shaky around this one.
Yes, you've got to be very careful. You've got to line yourself up into these corners properly. You've got to make sure you don't come into the corner too quickly, as Peter Kenyon seemed to be doing there, and he certainly doesn't want to put too much stress onto the shoulder of his team leader, Chris Froome, as we get an interesting shot here just to see what it's like trying to move around these corners.
Well, that group is getting a little bit bigger as riders are rejoining. Now, the breakaway originally, don't forget, was 22 strong. The vast majority of that breakaway is still ahead of the peloton, but they're not always one group. These are the two leaders being chased by 8 riders who are closing in just about. 74 seconds is the last time check we've got. But tremendous riding by these 2 riders to hold everybody off, and they've no intention of waiting for the chase. Because there are some good climbers in that chase group.
Yeah, well, these guys really took the risk when they saw the possibility on the slopes of the Col d'Illes, and they said, right, well, we will jump away here because there seems to be a lack of coordination in the group. The group was too big, and once they started to reduce the numbers in the breakaway group, they then decided that they would collaborate together. Time for a last quick drink for Sepp van Mark before we line up for the last big climb. That's Jakob Fuglsang there in the turquoise jersey. And the white sunglasses for AG2R just a little bit further back. That's Romain Bardet. He's got his teammate in there, Michael Kirel. That was Bardet with his arm up, just trying to maybe take on board now. In the early part of this race, Phil, they were looking for cold drinks. I think right now they might be looking for a bit of warm tea.
Hot coffee, I would think. It's still very, very heavy at the finishing line. The clouds are getting brighter, so by the time the riders get it, they may be okay. 10 minutes, 40 seconds. Team Sky getting themselves reorganised as we run off the slopes of the Port d'Alès.
Well, just to put it all back into perspective a little bit, Phil, let's not forget that most of the riders ahead on the road have lost an awful lot of time to Chris Froome and all of the other contenders in the overall standings over the first 11 days of this race. In fact, the closest riders are Fuglsang and Bardet in that second group on the road, and they're 20 minutes approximately down in the overall standings. So I don't think that Chris Froome will be too concerned about these guys. It's up to the other guys who would need to challenge Chris Froome on the final slopes of this summit of the Plateau de Bay.
This little group here, led by Jakob Fuglsang at the moment, I must be wondering just how good those two are up front, because they're not getting closer. Well, it's nice to see that the young South African Louis Meintjes is back there, although his shorts and his jersey are ripped to shreds. But he's got up very quickly, rejoined. This is Jan Barter, very aggressive rider, but he's not noted for these high mountain escapades, but he's had another great day in the Tour de France. These are the two men trying to spoil the party. They've led all the way over the Port d'Alès. They're now trying to do the same to the finishing line on the Plateau de Bay. Well, there is Louis Meintjes. You can see the jersey torn off. He went on that, overshot that right-hand corner, quickly got back on though, got back up this group of riders. Just going around the shoulders there. Fuglsang flicks his elbow, wants somebody else to do it, and Gorka Izagir is the man behind him. This group is now gambling on reaching those two leaders once the climb starts for sure. As I say, they're pretty good climbers. That's Roman Sicard kicking there to try and get across the gap. No collision at all here. As we head out away from Tarascon into Ornolac, Ussat-les-Bains, as we get onto the climb. Audley now.
Yes, they're following the river Ariège. This is the valley of the Ariège, the source of the Ariège is in the Black Lake, or the Lac Noir, high up in the Pyrenees in an altitude of 2,400 meters. That's the Ariège over towards the left-hand side. There's a beautiful railway line goes all the way down this valley, down towards the town of Aix-les-Thermes, which is the start of a number of the famous climbs in the Tour de France. For example, Aix-les-Trois-Domaines. Back with the main field. Still Team Sky doing more of the pacemaking, but no help, no assistance at all. Starting to queue up, we've got TJ Van Garderen. Van Garderen will have to keep a very close eye today on Nairo Quintana, because Quintana is only 17 seconds behind him in the overall standings, and Van Garderen has got some very high dreams of finishing on the podium in Paris. Inside of 22 kilometres to go for these two leaders. Sepp Van Mark at the front. That's Frans Maassen, by the way, the rider, the driver of the car of Lotto Jumbo himself, a winner of an opening stage of the Tour de France many, many years ago, back in 1989, when the stage finished in Futuroscope, and the stage victory there, in fact, created a little bit of a surprise, and it put eventually Claudio Chiappucci into the lead, and he never lost the lead of the Tour de France until the final time trial, when he lost it to Greg LeMond, who went on to win the Tour de France.
Of the world champion Kwiatkowski, who has struggled this first week of the Tour, and now is showing his real worth here as he follows the wheel for the moment of Sepp Van Mark. The gap is 11:17, Paul, and they're also increasing their gap over the chasing group.
Yeah, well, these two riders are riders with the big firepower, Phil. They're used to riding in the flatlands, and we're in the flattest part of today's stage, I would have to say, as they make their way away from Tarascon along the valley of the Ariège, and they will hope to try and build as much of an advantage as they can, because just looking at this guy in the second group on the road, Joaquim Rodriguez, already a stage victory under his belt, and that was to the summit of the Mur de Huy. Romain Bardet, who finished in 6th place overall in the Tour de France last year, he's in this group. He'll be looking for a stage victory, and I should think that they could wipe away that kind of deficit to 2.5 minutes on the early part of this climb. Because once we turn off this road, Phil, we turn very, very steeply, and we hit probably the hardest part of the climb, and then there is no respite for 10 miles of climbing.
Well, not far now. We make a right turn onto the climb shortly.
Back with the leaders, as we see here, Van Mark. Van Mark is definitely one of the one-day specialists, and here he's enjoying riding the Tour de France. He's been a professional since 2009. He was on the development squad from Flanders, the top sport of Flanders before he spent a couple of years with the Garmin Cervelo squad back in 2011 and 12, and in fact it was in 2012 that he won the Het Nieuwsblad one-day race. A very difficult race in the early part of the season, the opening event for the Belgian calendar. Second in Paris-Roubaix in 2013, and that's when people really started to regard Sepp van Mark in the yellow jersey there of Lotto Jumbo as a specialist in the one-day Cobblestone Classics. But today, Phil, I don't think he could ever have dreamed of being in the breakaway in a mountain stage.
20 kilometers to go, about 12 miles. Shortly we'll make the turn onto the plateau itself. Sepp van Mark heading it up. What is left of the peloton, and it's still a considerable size, and they're still over 11 minutes behind. They're not going to catch the two leaders now, but we are going to see a major assault. We're convinced by the heads of the Tour de France from this group.
But if you like, Phil, today we'll see two races going on. The race to win the stage victory, because everybody wants to win a stage of the Tour de France, and there's the added prestige of winning a mountain stage of the Tour. This is the final Pyrenean stage, but there's also the race to try and change the look of the overall classification. And as they make their way along the valley of the Ariège here, well, the weather's changing once again. Look at this.
Well, they're catching the rain now, as at the summit it has actually eased off and the clouds are getting a bit lighter, but not so at the moment. The world champion Kwiatkowski, in what looks like a rather relaxed position, is just using his legs as pistons to try and keep this breakaway going. 11:22 the gap. These two riders are still pulling away from their chasers, but not by much. It's just under 2 minutes the gap. This is the valley road now as we head away from Tarascon. The railway track runs right through here, and in the years gone by we've often been treated to a magnificent steam train, always standing on the road, rail side to watch the Tour go by.
Well, I think most in the group a little bit further down the road, it's still Kirel on the front for AG2R.
We are looking into the faces of the two AG2R riders here, trying to catch up with the lone leader now, because Michael Kwiatkowski, the world champion, has just dropped Sepp van Mark. And take a look at the rain, which is still coming down on the pass. Now he's going for gold.
He certainly is. He's made the move. This group of chasers are at 1 minute and 25 seconds. Kirel just turning himself inside out. He finished 10th overall in the Tour of Beijing last year. In the main field, Chris Froome knows that challenges will come as we start to get to the difficult part at the arrière du peloton. He's got his teammates all the way around him, but he knows to expect the attacks which will come from Nairo Quintana. I'm sure that Quintana, maybe he won't be thinking about trying to attack Chris Froome, but certainly he'll be trying to put pressure onto TJ Van Garderen, who is only 17 seconds ahead of him in the overall standings.
This is Guillaume Friedler here, who was in the break all day, and was first over the climb of the Porte d'Aspet. Seems an awful long time ago now, put back into the peloton as they prepare now to make the turn onto the plateau itself. Kwiatkowski, by the way, alone now, has never won a stage of the Tour de France, and he's ridden it 3 times. He's worn the white jersey for a long time, and he never won that either. Here he is. The white jersey he's got on now, though, is the jersey of a world champion. A first Polish and only Polish winner of this title.
And the only Polish rider to win the Amstel Gold Race at the very start of the year. A tough race in the southwestern corner of Holland. Hard to believe and hard to remember this race started in Holland almost 12 days ago. But that image you saw on his face there, Phil, that wasn't a smile, that was a grimace because of the pain that his body is going through currently. Still, Michael Kirel on the front for AG2R is doing all of this pacemaking. He's a pretty tall rider. He's just around about 1 meter 85, almost 6 feet tall. He's a slightly built rider, a great climber, and he's sacrificing himself for the man in second position.
Yep.
6th overall last year, Romain Bardet, and everything seems to have gone wrong in the early few days of the Tour de France this year, but today he can put things to rights.
This has been a super attack by Bardet, and yesterday he was suffering from sunstroke and he was very ill on the climbs, but he seems to have got round that. There he is, and his teammate Kirel trying to set it up for him. Now these boys are heading towards the start of the mountain itself, and they're still racing for position. Sky trying to keep control, but hey, Movistar on the right are trying to move Quintana into the attack seat.
Well, Quintana's on the right line of riders. Next alongside him in the lighter green jerseys of Europcar, they're trying to move Pierre Rolland towards the front, and on the inside line there, it is of course Sky looking after Chris Froome in the yellow jersey. Well, just inside of 11 minutes for the main field as they now charge into the small town of Les Cabanes, and that is where the start of this climb is. It comes at 16.5 kilometers to go, so they're around about a kilometer away from the start of the climb proper. Also got the Lotto Jumbo riders. They're trying to move their man Robert Hessink. That's Hessink third in line of the Lotto Jumbo riders. Peter Kenyuk in the white jersey, right alongside the barriers. There's a chap from his teammate behind him there to say, come on, accelerate, let's get Chris Froome around here in a decent position. Froome on the inside of the barriers. It looks as if everybody's around there nice and safely. There's one rider from Europcar, I think he's put the brakes on. He said, right, that's enough for today. And he's just going to try and go into survival mode. Dan Martin, the hero of yesterday, wears the red number as the most aggressive rider of yesterday's stage, and what a fantastic ride he did on yesterday's stage. Now, this is the start of the Plateau de Bay for the main field. Peter Kenyuk moves to the front, champion of Great Britain. There you can see Chris Froome. He just wants to come up there, and there in the polka dot jersey is his mate Richie Porte.
Really has been a scurrying of the riders to the front now. Just a brief look there at the Chateau of Verdun as the riders now start to climb up the mountains.
Magnificent chateau towards the side, but this is what happens when you've worked like a Trojan for the team and you start a climb like this, a very nasty climb. As soon as you move away there, Dan Martin, well, you know, Phil, not a surprise at all. He wears the red jersey, most aggressive rider of yesterday. He's paying for those efforts he left on the road.
Yes, all the riders now know what's ahead of them. It is the hardest climb of the visit this year into the Pyrenees, and one by one they're dropping off. This is now becoming a serious battle amongst the leaders of the Tour.
That was Le Danu and Jeremy Waugh, who were in the breakaway group early on today, but the main field still pretty much under the control of Team Sky. That's Peter Kenyuk in first place. Second place is Nicholas Roach behind him. That's Gerrit Thomas, a G as they like to call him. Almost missed the polka dot jersey there of Richie Porte. But on the shoulders of Chris Froome, as always, as it has been since we came into the mountains, is the Colombian climber Nairo Quintana.
Now, our cameras are French, and of course they're going to stay here where the Tour de France is enacting. But let me remind you, still on his own up front is the world champion Kwiatkowski, being chased by the rider he left behind at half a minute. That's Van Mark. The second chase contains some good climbers are still there at 1 minute and 33. But this is the action in the Tour de France right now, as we're waiting for the attacks to come from the peloton. 10 minutes 24 seconds as the climbers commence now. Peter Kenyuk has got himself to the front, the champion of Great Britain, to try and control this race for Sky.
Just coming up on the far left-hand side, I noticed the turquoise jersey with the Italian bands around the middle. That was Vincenzo Nibali.
There's a brief look at Lars Batik here. Now looks like Dango Technohymenot is unhitching at the back here, so too Lars Bak. He's gone. These riders now being split off by the pacemaking of Peter Kenyuk here. Now the yellow jersey of Chris Froome, you can see for yourself, is in 4th place, but the Sky Boys have still got control. They're waiting for an attack from the team on the right with the big M's on the jersey.
Yes, that's Team Movistar. That is the team of Alejandro Valverde, who's high up in the overall standing. He's 4th overall, and Nairo Quintana, who is 3rd overall. And I'm sure that Nairo Quintana will have to make a move today. Maybe not to try and dethrone Chris Froome, but to put a little bit of pressure onto the shoulders of TJ Van Garderen, the American, who sits in 2nd place overall and actually looks very comfortably there up alongside Chris Froome in the yellow jersey.
And the blue jersey there with the stripes around it, Vincenzo Nibali lost nearly a minute yesterday in the last 5 kilometers on a silly little small hill, and he was in terrible difficulty, but he's right there again at the moment. This is Fulsang. This is the chase group now trying to liven itself up, because they're still looking for 30 seconds, 1:24 to the leader and about 50 seconds to the second rider on the road. This is a good move. It had to come soon.
Well, they had to make the move very early on because they've still got to eat into the advantage. You know, when you are the world champion, you've got a fairly big pedigree, and these guys will know that Michael Kwiatkowski is no slouch. He is just getting into his own rhythm right now, and what was interesting to me, Phil, with that acceleration of Jakob Fuglsang, Gorka Izagir was the rider who was actually in difficulty, and he was supposed to be the man. You can see he's disappeared in the dark blue jersey. It's great to see Louis Meintjes there in fourth position. They're going to watch out for this young rider here, because if they drag him up to the finish line, Phil, he's going to be a tough kid to beat.
I'm just wondering if Izagir may have got word from the cars that if the peloton comes up, his idea was to be joined by Quintana and try and give him a springboard to get time on Chris Froome. Maybe he's still enacting the tactic as he lets these riders go away. Louis Meintjes still there on the back of that chase.
Well, another youngster at the front alongside Peter Kenyuk here. That's Bob Jungels, the Luxembourg national champion. He's pacing his man, Bauke Mollema, who had a very good ride yesterday, as we see the big struggling side here of rider Heyerdahl, number 164, the former winner of the Giro d'Italia. But watch out for him in the last week of the race. And let's not forget, Phil, this is a man who finished in 5th place overall in the Giro.
This is the catch of Sepp Van Mark as well. He's gone back now by the chase group. The main field, of course, Sky is proving once again he's got plenty of teammates back around in Chris Froome, and I think we've only got Samuel Sanchez alongside, as we had yesterday, in Team BMC.
So now, Rafael Majka comes to the front. This is the guy who yesterday won the stage, and people said, well, now you're starting to think about winning the King of the Mountains competition. He said, no, I came to this race for one thing, and that was for my man Contador, Rodriguez.
He's attacking now, trying to break it up. But these are desperate moments. He's got to try and get up to Kwiatkowski. Rodriguez, who had a win on the Mer de Huy, the second day or third day of the Tour de France. And now he's trying to reach the world champion. Funny enough, the world champion was trying to work on the Mer de Huy to help his teammate get victory.
Well, as we can see now coming forward, that's Michael Rogers doing the pacemaking there for Tinkoff Saxo. Maybe Alberto Contador has got through his bad days and he's trying to ride himself into form. 161 is Andrew Talansky, just trying to stay in contact at the back end of this group, but he's having a hard time here this afternoon.
But he's still hanging on in there. It's a reasonable sized peloton considering the pressure which is being put on, but no attacks yet from the field. This is Jurasek, who is being, from the original breakaway, coming back to it now.
Yes, how funny the situation, Phil. We've still got Michael Kwiatkowski leading this race on the road by around about a minute, but the three riders who've gone off in chase behind him are the riders who were the best place in that leading group of 22 this morning. 18th, 19th and 20th overall at the start of the day. Fuglsang, Rodriguez and Bardet.
Looking for 10 kilometres at the moment, as we're looking at now. Peter Kenyuk has decided he can't go anymore. He's played a great part today for the team, but now it's legs that are gone and he's off the back. Not far up the road will be 10 kilometres to go now. 9:55, not surprising the gap is coming down, but slowly. But we've just seen Peter Kenyuk having done his turn of pacemaking. He has now dropped away from Chris Froome's side, and there's also the teammates of Alberto Contador have started to set the pace as well.
Well, these are the three chasers. They're in second, third and fourth place on the row. Joachim Rodriguez is, for me, the most experienced rider of this group. Jakob Fuglsang, a rider who came into professional road racing with a background as a mountain biker. And Romain Bardet, the hope of France, who sits there in third place. He'd be loving to try and get himself the victory this afternoon. And we see here Sylvain Chavanel. He's also slipping backwards.
He's lost 5 minutes since he topped the last climb on the leaders, and he's gone back into the peloton. As we continue now to see, this is a big effort by Joachim Rodriguez in an attempt to crack the other two. Bardet, remember, had heat stroke yesterday. He was sick on the climbs, had a wonderful day of racing today. One by one, they're going back into the pack.
Well, I said yesterday, Michael Rogers from Canberra, Australia, doing a very good job, and he's looking like he's really stirring it up for Contador today.
10 kilometres to go for the world champion. He has a real chance to win his first stage in the Tour de France. Kwiatkowski goes under the banner, but they're trying to bring him back here. He's being chased now by Jakob Fuglsang, Romain Bardet and Joachim Rodriguez. And there they are, these three riders trying to bring back Kwiatkowski. The gap is down on the peloton too, 9:43 the spread.
Yes, well, they're now getting into a really serious chase. Looking a little bit further down now, we can start to see, well, Mick Rogers, job done for the day. He said, thank you very much. I'll leave it up to Alberto Contador. He's handed over responsibility to Kreuziger and Maschka.
Well, Jens Voigt, we're watching the battle on the final climb today now. Are those three going to nail back Kwiatkowski?
Well, if they catch him, and it looks like they're getting slowly but surely closer to him, if they catch him, they might actually slow down, because then he has four strong, experienced riders together, and nobody wants to work first. Nobody wants to work and then lose the sprint because you work too much. So there might be a lot of like cat and mouse playing going on in the moment they catch Kwiatkowski. But they still have 40 seconds to go.
Yeah, but yet.
Well, riders now just hanging on for as long as possible. Serge Pauwels, who almost got the second place yesterday, got caught near the finishing line, now also going off the back along with Andrew Talansky as we go up towards the leader. This is a real turn here by Jakob Fuglsang, but Rodriguez looks as though he's up for the fight. Now, has Fuglsang done too much there? Rodriguez is going to find out.
Well, as I said, you know, the cleverest rider in this group is Rodriguez, and he waits for a move like that. Fuglsang, he really is itching to try and get himself the victory, and the man who just keeps responding, allowing him to make the moves there, is Romain Bardet, out of the saddle. Amazing to think that this kid yesterday, Phil, had to nurse his body through the stage. He was suffering from heat stroke, and I just remember what a teammate of mine once said, Johan de Munt, who won the Tour of Italy, said after a bad day in a race like the Tour de France, the next day you can sometimes have a super day.
I tell you, those guys are flying up this hill. It's a pity our cameras can't show you just how hard it really is. Now, one by one, the Sky team are using the men. This is Nicholas Roach now, who's slipping away. Soon, Chris Froome is going to rely very heavily on Richie Porte, who rides in that polka dot jersey.
Behind Richie Porte in that polka dot jersey is Geraint Thomas, but as you can see, I have a feeling today that Tinkoff Saxo are trying to set something up for Alberto Contador, because they've got two riders on the front setting the pacemaker. Look at Nibali there in the right, number one, looking across at TJ Van Garderen to see if he can see any signs of weakness on the shoulders of the American.
I tell you, Tony Galopin also again back in at the kill at the late stage of a mountain race, but he's now finding this one a hill too far, I think. The chase three behind are now only 23 seconds back of Kwiatkowski, and the chase in the peloton, which is now at 9 minutes, is thinning out rapidly.
Well, that is Kreuziger, who's swung off. Now he's leaving it up to the man who won the stage yesterday, Rafael Majka. He's just going to, well, look at the damage that they've done. They've reduced that group in numbers, but most of the big-named riders are in this group. One man who has suffered, though, is Tony Galopin. Warren Barguil, suffering from a nasty crash just a couple of days ago, but he's hanging on in there, hanging tough.
I'm not sure how many riders are left out between the bunch now. I think about 10 or 11 are between this group and the leader on the road. But it's only Fuglsang, Bardet and Rodriguez who can reach the leader, I think. They're at 34 seconds now. Here they are. But they're attacking each other with the acceleration. It looks to me as though Rodriguez, I thought he was going to go again there, but I think Fuglsang is ready for it.
Well, I think the kind of tactic that Rodriguez will attack, he's in the red shorts there, Phil. He'll just keep a very close eye on the other. Say, come on, let's work together. Let us catch the rider in front first before we start attacking each other one by one, because otherwise we're going to slow down on our organisation.
Now, Jens, we've got a situation here with the three chasers that don't want to help each other anymore.
Yeah, sometimes that happens. They go, okay, it would need a maximum effort to catch the leader, to catch Kwiatkowski. Nobody wants to do that big pull, because the second you reach the wheel of Kwiatkowski, the other two guys, he's sitting on your wheel, they might just jump off your wheel and attack you, and if you give it too much, you might be unable to follow the counter-attack. So it's already a little bit of poker game, which often saves the single rider out there, because he's not stronger than them three together. But since they don't work together, he can still beat them, and he can still hold them off. So in a moment, I think them three just considering how we're going to catch him without killing ourselves.
Yeah, but Jens, another thing is with a long breakaway like that, it's also a little bit of a leveler as well, and those three riders seem to have now come to about the same level. Not one of them is stronger than the others.
That's what it looks like. They kept attacking each other and nobody could drop each other. Oh, that looks like a strong acceleration here from Rafael Majka.
Well, it's a good one, Jens, you're absolutely right, and now we're trying again. Joaquim Rodriguez has put in another acceleration. This is what climbers can do. Now, can they answer that one? And Rafał Majka is doing the same. What he's trying to do here now is to put Contador into a position to attack Chris Froome.
Well, it's put a little bit of difficulty onto Warren Barguil. He's the hope of France. He's been successful in the Pyrenees in this race, but look at this. Now all of a sudden Majka's job is done for the afternoon. Rodriguez at 36 years of age is trying to put space between himself and the other two riders. He wants to ride across this gap on his own. He knows it's now only down to about 20 seconds the advantage. This is a guy, Phil, who's already got one stage victory under the belt, and the other two are in a spot of bother.
Well, I'll tell you what, this counter-attacking has put them within 13 seconds of Kwiatkowski. Now Bardet has cracked, and so we've just seen Rafał Majka put in a real effort here, and I think it was for Contador, but for some reason he looked over his shoulder and he stopped the attack, and now he's in trouble. He's off the back of the group.
Well, Rafał Majka, as all of the other riders of Tinkoff Saxo, they are trying to race Alberto Contador back into the Tour de France here this afternoon. That is Sammy Sanchez, the Olympic champion from Beijing. Well, he's coming across the gap there, Rodriguez.
And it's the biggest danger in that breakaway, trying to reach the world champion. Just 7.8 kilometers from the summit. The man that won the stage at the Mer de Huy is doing the climb of his life here, and Kwiatkowski's seen him coming. What's he got left to answer this one?
Well, I don't think he'll have much to respond to, Rodriguez. Rodriguez is a great reference when it comes to finishing at the top of mountains like this, but Kwiatkowski is the world champion. He will try and recover a bit further back down the slopes. It's Romain Bardet, number 12. He really wants to get this victory. He keeps looking around the corners. You almost want to straighten up the road to try and see the gap between yourself, but he's been left behind by Fuglsang because Fuglsang has taken flight after the two leaders.
Yeah, Bardet blew on that last attack with Rodriguez, and now he's on the defensive here. There's 11 riders left in the Chris Froome group as we've gone up to the attack here, but Rodriguez himself is pushing away here, and Bardet is not having any luck at all. It looks as though he's cracked Kwiatkowski as we go forward. 10 kilometers to go for the peloton as well, and the world champion is now passing it down the ranks because Fuglsang has passed him up there as well. So it's all changed, and this hill is so unforgiving. 7.4 kilometers to go. 8 minutes and 23 seconds. The peloton are coming. They won't catch the main attackers of the day now. Now, Fuglsang is surprising us, but he couldn't control Joachim Rodriguez.
Well, the problem is, Phil, we're still looking at a good 7.5 kilometers to go to the finish. That's still going to take them pretty close to 20 minutes to get to the top of this climb. You can see the concentration now etched onto the face of Joachim Rodriguez. He knows what he has to do. He's got to ride a solo individual time trial over the last 20 minutes of this race, while behind it's still Team Sky dictating the pace. Well, Thibaut Pinot, number 21, seems to have bounced himself back into the Tour de France. He can start to dream about possibly winning a stage in the Alps, because I don't think he's going to catch the leaders on today's stage.
No, but what a ride. 11 riders left in that bunch, and he's having a resurgence here. He's lost way too much time, but his body is clearly changing. The injuries are healing that he got in the first few days of racing. 8:17.
Sammy Sanchez, number 66, he rides for BMC. He's a teammate of TJ Van Garderen. He's on and off the back of this group like a yo-yo. He's 37 years of age. He wants to stay in contact with this group because he knows that if you want to finish on the podium with the Tour de France and it comes down to 10 or 12 riders left like this, it's always a big advantage to have a teammate up alongside you.
Well, Tasmanian Richie Porte, or Welshman Geraint Thomas there, the two big final pacemakers for Chris Froome as they try to make it now. This is the rider. He's never won a major mountain stage in the Tour de France. He's won 2 stages up small hills. Here he is now challenging in the hardest climb of the Pyrenees. Yes. And I wonder if Fuglsang can reach him.
Well, I tell you what, the Spanish flags will be starting to fly quite high. Richie Porte now is doing the damage, and at the moment he's keeping Chris Froome comfortably in the yellow jersey, but he's also keeping Geraint Thomas comfortably in 5th place overall. Watch out for the climber, though, in the white jersey over on the right-hand side. We get a chance to see the laboured pedalling style, though, of Alberto Contador.
He is definitely not firing, and that may be why Majka made the pace and swung off and said blow this, because Contador, number 41, is still not having a good tour here. but Nibali looks as though he might be recovering. Number 1.
Well, it's going to be a funny tour, I think, Phil, as we go into the last week. Riders having good days and bad days, and that's what they'll all be hoping can happen to Chris Froome, because I think that's... Oh, there's the move by Contador.
Oh, well, he's going to bring the lie to my words here, because he's going to have a go, and now let's watch the reaction. Richie Porte is going to have to pick it up, the man that won the Tour of Italy and wants to win the Tour de France. This is a serious reversal of form by Alberto Contador. The team said today they would wait until the last climb to see how Alberto was feeling. Well, I think he's giving us his answer.
Well, he is, Phil. He starts the day in 6th place overall. He's looking for 4 minutes and 4 seconds. He's not very far away from Spain. He is a fighter. He's a racer. He will do everything he can to ride himself back into the Tour de France here this afternoon.
Well, he is on his day the best climber in the world. Jens Voigt, what do you think of this?
It's a good attack. It's a really good attack. It's brave, but how long can Alberto keep 500, 600 watts going? Look at the experience of young Richie Porte. He's not even accelerating a single little bit. He's just letting Alberto out there and notching the speed up just by half a kilometer an hour, and I'm sure they're going to bring Alberto back. See, Alberto's already looking back. That's not a good sign. That's not a sign of confidence. Alberto, no, he don't have it to really drop him. He had to catch him again already. It was a good attack, but almost a boomerang attack. It went out and pretty quickly it came back. But hey, we got to give it to him for trying.
Here, 10 out of 10 for that. And we're watching now the way that it's come up here. Now look at this now. They're attacking the leader after the attack of Contador. Vincenzo Nibali, the winner of the Tour, has gone from the front of the group. So Richie Porte, who's just brought back Contador, has got to try and do it again.
Well, he doesn't really, Phil, because let's not forget that Vincenzo Nibali is more than 7 minutes behind in the overall standings. And what Jens was just saying a few moments ago is they mustn't panic, Team Sky. They've got to be sensible at moments like this, allow these attacks to come out one at a time, and then slowly, if they can, lift up the pace and try and pull back the deficit. It's up to the other riders, who Vincenzo Nibali will be start to threatening their position in the overall standings, to take up the pacemaking. And I'm a little bit surprised to see that for the moment there's been still no response for the man in the white jersey, Nairo Quintana.
Well, I'm beginning to sense that these teams are combining here. Contador was the first one to go. He's 4 minutes behind. Now it's Nibali. By my estimation, the next one will be Quintana.
But bear in mind that the only man in this group now that's got a teammate is Chris Froome has 2 teammates. Nairo Quintana has 1 teammate, Alejandro Valverde, and that is always a very big asset as we run down towards the finish. By the way, I'd forgotten there's a lone leader still blowing his lonely furrow at the front of the race, Joaquim Rodriguez.
And don't forget that TJ Van Garderen, the American, is still promising a podium finish for the American as he sits second at the moment, and he's still in that very select group of riders. Jakob Fuglsang here is still riding the road in second place as he continues up the mountain, but Rodriguez is still hanging on at 5.7.
Third place on the road there. Romain Bardet was put in difficulty first of all by the attack of Joaquim Rodriguez, then by the counter move by Jakob Fuglsang, but he's now starting to find his rhythm, and bear in mind he's racing in France.
Talking of rhythm, this man has found his rhythm too, from losing a silly best part of a minute yesterday, about 4k from the finish. He's now looking like a different rider, and he's been told by his team manager he can go and find himself a new team next year because he's fallen out with Alexander Vinokourov. Maybe this is his answer.
Well, he is a man who's got great class. Vincenzo Nibali, you know, he's only 30 years of age. He's the national road racing champion, but there's no panic yet alongside the Sky train. Alberto Contador, number 41, he made the move. There's Bauke Mollema, number 141. Thibaut Pinot riding in the position that we'd expected to see him in, a rider who was 3rd overall in the Tour de France last year. But this is gusto. This is what the Italians like to call la grinta, the courage, and that's how this man is riding now. He is a great champion. He's the defending champion of the Tour de France.
Now, what do you think? Well, this is the other one, and this is what I was about to ask you, Jens. Valverde has now decided to stretch the legs. It's the only way to break Sky is to use all of the teams, and now it's Valverde, and they've caught Chris Froome at the moment in great difficulty at 5.2 kilometers to go.
Well, he's got the cadence going up high, but he lost a couple of lengths there as he slowly claws his way back up to the wheel of his teammate. And the ease, when you look at the ease of Nairo Quintana's pedaling style, You know, one of the strongest assets I think that Movistar have got is Alejandro Valverde this year. Looks over his shoulder, Phil. In fact, he's going a second time as he tries to come across the gap to Vincenzo Nibali.
This race is showing all the signs that all the teams with leaders have combined to race against Froome on the climb of the plateau. And now the next attack must come from the rider in the white jersey. 5 kilometres to go for Joaquim Rodriguez. 5 kilometres away from his first ever mountain victory in a stage of the Tour de France.
Yeah, well, sadly, Phil, I have to tell him that 5 kilometres is still going to take him close to 15 minutes. Look at the face there. You can almost feel the pain written across that face of Joaquim Rodriguez, while it's concentration written into the face of this man who doesn't show any emotion at all.
Vincenzo Nibali here has become the carrot now for the rest of the group. And there goes Valverde again. No reaction yet from Team Sky. This is another kick from the champion of Spain.
Well, they have to be very, very careful, especially Richie Porte, who made that savage acceleration and actually put Chris Froome into a little bit of difficulty just a few moments ago. And they have to bear in mind, they have to look at the clock, Phil. Bear in mind, 4 minutes is what Alejandro Valverde has to make up in this kind of a situation. But every day that they make moves like this, it'll put pressure onto the shoulders of Chris Froome and his team. And he's caught now and past Vincenzo Nibali.
Well, we've got the white jersey of Nairo Quintana down there, and he can't really counter while Valverde is on the attack, and right behind Quintana is the red jersey of TJ Van Garderen. Well, what is apparent now is the riders have not given up. They've not lost hope of winning this Tour de France, even though Froome has appeared to be unbeatable.
Day is not too very far behind Fuglsang, around about 20 seconds the difference between them. The situation on the road then is this man Joaquim Rodriguez at 110 back to Fuglsang, 130 back to Romain Bardet. Now is acceleration coming from Froome. Quintana locked right onto his wheel, but can he open up the gap?
The brutal acceleration again of Chris Froome. Quintana saw it, but did anybody else have the Contador's trying to get on board, and Van Garderen also trying to react?
Well, Contador has got on board. Froome, I think, had seen the work done by his teammates there, and he jumped past Geraint Thomas. I'm not sure why he felt that he needed to do that, but what he's done is he's isolated himself and also isolated who his major challenges are going to be. Contador is riding better as this tour progresses, and I wouldn't be surprised to see a cheeky little move come from Contador down towards the end.
Well, they're having to repair the damage again now and try and get it back together, but now Valverde said, you started, I'll try and finish it. Alejandro Valverde, 4th in the Tour de France. He launches an attack.
Well, you know, I just question why Chris Froome made that move, because he's isolated himself, and now he's got a situation where he's got 2 Movistar riders against him. Geraint Thomas is fighting to come back, and Quintana is looking for the move again.
He's chasing everything, Chris Froome. The 2 Movistar riders, joint leaders of the team, are counter-attacking and attacking. And now it's Quintana, and this time can Chris claw his way across to the back wheel of Quintana?
Yeah, but look at the job that's being done, Phil, a little bit further back by Geraint Thomas. He keeps fighting his way back up here, and as soon as he makes the contact, if he can make the contact here, I think he can come to the front of this group and start doing tempo once again.
Well, they've passed under 4 kilometres to go now. Quintana has been answered. The incredible Geraint Thomas has ridden himself back to the front to try and cool it all down.
I think what he's got to do now, Froome, is just allow Geraint Thomas to do the pacemaking. But you know what? They're going to have to put a noose around the neck of Alejandro Valverde, because he's lining himself up for another move here. Movistar are going to give it to Chris Froome every time they go into the mountains with this 2-pronged attack.
This is Bardet here. He's 3rd on the road as they're racing up towards the finish, and we mustn't forget the big day that Joaquim Rodriguez is about to have as he comes up the Plateau de Bay. There he is as he climbs up at 1.2 kilometres to go. The status quo again back in that chase group.
Well,
slip away, and here's poor old Michael Kwiatkowski, who has now been caught. He's put on a wet top there as well, as he's now seeing. We never thought he would see the yellow jersey once 12 minutes behind him, and not that long ago. The world champion checking out who's in that group.
But that was the ride of the day. Joaquim Rodriguez, 36 years of age. What a job.
Now let's get back to the action. This is the Tour de France for the yellow now, and that man Geraint Thomas has become the top rider here. The way he's looked after that race leader today, Going back quickly to the second place finisher. This is Jakob Fuglsang coming up towards the line. And a good second place for him.
He'll move up a little bit in the overall standings, but he just did not have that firepower and maybe the grinta that Joaquim Rodriguez had a little bit further up. But he was given a free hand by Team Astana. They said, right, we don't have any faith in Vincenzo Nibali anymore. You can be a free hand in the race this afternoon. But Nibali's ridden pretty well this afternoon.
I think there's a lot of people ridden well, but they haven't been able to get rid of Chris Froome, but they certainly hit him as hard as they could. As Fuglsang crosses the line in second place, and it should go third to the renaissance of this Frenchman here, Romain Bardet, at a great third place. Sick as a dog on the climbs yesterday with sunstroke. Now he's third up the Plateau de Bay. Well done, and the French have got something to cheer at last.
Well, Phil, again, just at 24 years of age, Romain Bardet, he was 6th overall in the Tour de France last year, and he showed that he can bounce back from adversity. We'll watch him again next year.
He'll be looking forward to the Alps next week. Real time gaps, and Chris Froome doesn't want to give away 1 second of his overall lead, and he's got on his back wheel there, Quintana. This is a terrific power finish by Alejandro Valverde. They'll probably give him 2 seconds on the line over Froome.
But a little bit of a psychological smack in the face there from Alejandro Valverde. I think we both agree, Phil, he's got some of the best form that he showed in the Tour de France in recent years. Further down the slopes, though, this is Andrew Talansky.
Stage result, Rodriguez ahead of Fuglsang there. As we look down the gap, they gave it a 1 second difference between Valverde and Chris Froome. So they threw everything they had at him, but at the end of the day, one of them got 1 second over Chris Froome, who's crossed the line in 10th place. Well done to Louis Meintjes. He crashed today heavily. He's crossed the line in 5th place. He's only 23 years of age.
That's a brilliant performance, I'd have to say there, Phil, because of the courage to have that nasty little crash on the way down and then get yourself back into the race was impressive. But this man, maybe he wanted it just a little bit more than everyone else in that group of 22, which got clear after 20 kilometres of the stage.
Big win for Joaquim Rodriguez, his first in the high mountains of any Tour de France. He's always performed well in the Tour of Italy and the Tour of Spain, but in this race he's never had the same success.
Valverde, well, what a punch this man has got at the top of a mountain, and Chris Froome, he knew he had to respond to this acceleration. Geraint Thomas, well, he really was the man of the match for Team Sky as he sat up here, and hopefully there's no time gap between him and Alberto Contador, because Alberto Contador was just 1 second behind Geraint Thomas at the start of the day. Contador in 6th place, Geraint Thomas in 5th.
Stage 13 of the Tour de France. This is Matthew Keenan with you. And after 3 gruelling days through the Pyrenees, those who just survived the mountains will be hoping to make the most of a stage that shouldn't attract the attention of the men racing for yellow. A journey northeast today as they make their way from Muret through to Rodez. It's a long stage at 198.5 kilometres. It's a relatively calm start, but it gets difficult towards the end. 3 categorised climbs, they then descend towards the finish before the last kilometre is a steep rise through to Rodez. The start right on 12:20 this afternoon before they went through the neutral zone for 20 minutes, and then the flag came in to get racing started. Weather played a big part in the stage yesterday. It started hot, it finished cold. Today it has started hot and it is set to finish hot. An aggressive start to the stage. It took a little while for the break to form, but now it has. 6 riders off the fronts. Nathan Huss, the Australian from the Cannondale Garmin team, is in the green colours. He was the last rider to make it across. And it would have been a brutal team meeting if for the second day running the boys in green missed the move. This is Pierre-Luc Perichon from Breton Séché. We've seen a fair bit of him throughout the race. The white colours for FDJ, that is Alexander Geniez. He is very much the local. He comes from just a few kilometres away from the finish line. Thomas de Gent is in there in the red colours with Lotto Soudal. In the green for Europcar, it's Cyril Goutier. And the yellow colours of Lotto NL Jumbo, it's Wilco Kelderman. So that's the composition of the 6 riders off the front. It's Gautier in the green colours of Europcar, who's the best placed overall. He sits in 53rd position at 1 hour, 8 minutes and 45 seconds behind the yellow jersey of Froome. 36 degrees here at the finish line, and it feels every bit of that 36 degrees, if not more. It is blistering hot. There's no shade, there's not a lot of foliage at the finish line, and when the peloton gets here, I'm sure the large majority of them will be dehydrated. Yesterday, they started the stage a little concerned about combating the dehydration, as there were recorded temperatures through the valley roads yesterday approaching 40 degrees. By the finish, it was 14, wet, cold and miserable. 175 riders on the start line today. We had 2 abandonments yesterday. Unfortunately, Alex Dowsett, the former world hour record holder, riding for Movistar, he abandoned the race. The injuries that he sustained in the first week, he was never quite able to recuperate from them. Zach Dempster riding for Bora Argon 18, another man who abandoned yesterday. The day before, he was shown some compassion by the chief commissaire and also the race organisers, as he was outside the time delay, but they allowed him to start yesterday's stage. But his saddle sores just got too much. He couldn't cope. He's on his way home. Giant Alpecin, they're the team controlling the race at the front. The team of John Degenkolb, they continue to search for a stage win. After, for them, the Tour de France the last 2 years, courtesy of Marcel Kittel, has been extremely successful. The peloton now make their way through the town of Le Vert. Looks like we can just spot the cathedral that sits at the top of the hill in the centre of town. There it is, off to the right-hand side. It was built by the Benedictines. The construction of this cathedral started in 1098. It was destroyed during the siege of 1211, but later rebuilt. There's a famous bell tower in it as well, known as the legend of the Jack O' the Clock. Legend tells of Jack O' the Clock being built by a prisoner who was sentenced to ring the bells every hour to show that he was still there, but he created an automated system to allow the bells to still ring as he escaped. Well, he saw a fair bit of Thomas de Gent in the first 20 kilometres yesterday in the red colours of Lotto Soudal. He sat on the front and he did the job to get Andre Greipel the maximum points at the intermediate sprint on yesterday's stage. Greipel sits just 2 points behind the green jersey of Peter Sagan. And today's finish, the last 600 metres are really tough. In fact, across the last 600 metres, the average gradient is almost 10%. It's perfect for Peter Sagan. If Tinkoff Saxo were to get on the front and assist with the chasing, this could be the sort of day where Peter Sagan built himself up a buffer in the race for green. We've seen a lot of this man. This is Perichon in the 3rd breakaway of the Tour for him. Breton Séché, they've done well to get themselves represented in so many breaks. Geniez had a brilliant month of May when he finished in 9th position at the Giro d'Italia. Cyril Gautier, he was close last year on the stage to Bagnères de Bigorre. He was in the break that included Michael Rogers. It also included Thomas Voeckler. Rogers went on to win the stage. Wilco Kelderman, a man who rode well in last year's Giro d'Italia. At last year's Giro d'Italia, he finished in 7th. The guitar playing, always singing, Nathan Huss. There, South African, incidentally the first South African to ever have won a stage at the Tour de France. That was some 14 years ago. He's now sports director with Cannondale Garmin, and he has a reputation for getting a little animated and making it pretty clear to his riders exactly what he thinks. A slight headwind throughout the stage today. There was certainly a headwind at the finish of yesterday's stage up the climb to Plateau de Bay, and it worked in favour of one and against another. Pierre Rolland, who finished strongly. He was in the yellow jersey group, 15th position on the stage, just behind Alberto Contador. Pierre Rolland said the headwind really helped him. It gave him more of an advantage when he was sitting on the wheels, and it nullified some of the attacks that we saw from Valverde, Contador and Nairo Quintana. By contrast, Bauke Mollema, he said the headwind killed him as he just lost contact and then had to fight the headwind himself. He slipped further away. He finished in 19th position. And the MTM Becker colours down at the back of the peloton with the South African national champion, Jacques-Jans van Rensburg. Yesterday, the South Africans certainly had a lot to cheer about with Louis Meintjes in the break. An unfortunate crash for him. Said he just took one too many risks on the way down. Summer really has struck today. A long day on the front for the boys from Giant Alpecin.
100 kilometres. About 10 minutes ago, they did contest the sprint in La Bouterie, and it was all the usual suspects taking part. But this time, Andre Greipel showing a clean pair of wheels to John Degenkolb, Peter Sagan and Mark Cavendish, and on the road has got himself in the lead. As the riders continue with a reasonably high speed at the moment. It is very, very hot at the moment. We're pushing up now in Fahrenheit to 93 degrees, which takes us up to 34 degrees Celsius.
Yes, a lot of people say it's going to get an awful lot hotter, though, because 36, 38 degrees Celsius is quite possible on the finishing line with the reflected heat. And these guys, although they got clear, they've never really been given much of an advantage. They were at one stage just over 4 minutes, and then Giant Alpecin, the team of John Degenkolb, came to the front and began to do most of the pacemaking here. And I think really, because of that, that's why it's now begun to see it pegged. The finishing climb, I think, will suit John Degenkolb, but it will also suit Peter Sagan, and Sagan will be thinking about the possibility of getting the yellow jersey back, because in the virtual standings, those are the standings as they sit on the road at the moment, Andre Greipel has gone back into the lead in the Skoda green jersey points competition by a single point. That's 261 points to Greipel and 260 points to Peter Sagan. And obviously Peter Sagan, I think, is better suited to the finish line here. And Andre Greipel himself, he said before the start that he didn't think he would be able to mix it in the finish, but maybe with the way he's riding at the moment, he may be inspired to stay in contact. But it is a very, very difficult climb up towards the finishing line. This part of the world, by the way, as we move, currently we're in the Département of the Tarn. We will finish in the Département of the Aveyron, which is named after the river Aveyron, is reputedly at this time of the year, whenever the Tour de France comes down here, very, very hot indeed. And a lot of riders are not enjoying the heat, which is close to 34 and 36 degrees Celsius. And we have had feedback from a couple of people out on the road, and when the tar is black, it really feels just that little bit hotter as the conditions get affected by the reflected heat on the road.
Well, surprisingly, Paul, on the Road to Rodez, we've only ever had one finish there back in 1984. You rode the race, and you told me before you couldn't remember making the finishing line, but you did.
Well, I did, yes, I did finish, but the one thing that I do remember is racing down in this part of the world, Phil, it was always very, very hot. And although these are not big climbs we're looking at today, we've got a third category and two fourth category climbs looming on the horizon. In this part of the world, they just seem to be that little bit longer because it's hot. And the fact is, if you look at the trees there, there's hardly any breeze at all. So although it says 34 degrees Celsius on the thermometer, it always feels that much hotter in this part of the world. The air is almost, you could almost cut the air with a knife.
Interesting
chance to see the beautiful Aveyron River, and just over to the far side there's a very interesting castle, and that on the top of the hill there is the castle of Castelnau-du-Lévis. It was formerly a seigneury of great importance, and slowly declined over the years. But the castle itself goes back to 1235, and the interesting thing about it is it's got a 40-meter lookout, and it's called a guet, which is an important part of medieval military architecture. The turret is attached onto the keep just towards the side there. and it was the highest point of the castle, the turret at which made it a very important lookout point over the river and the valley of the Tarn. Fantastic and quite interesting as you look down on that, what remains of the old castle. A little bit of arrête pour les besoins naturels, a nature break for most of the riders. That's Richie Port just stopping over to the right-hand side. The gap has come up to 4 minutes, but I think this is a moment when we'll start to see, although they're having a natural break, we'll see the gap go up a fraction, but Giant Alpecin are not going to give too many presents out on a day like today, and I think we'll start to see, once we get into the real rough part of this course, they'll start the chase in earnest.
Well, I know they want to get the man home first, John Degenkolb, but frankly, in this weather, how much energy are they giving away here, as they've still got 90 kilometers to race beneath this sun. 4 minutes 3 seconds. We're just a second short of the biggest margin they've had since they got together after 7 kilometers. They're certainly not giving up. I think they're gambling. They might be allowed a little bit more freedom. Now we've had that sprint for the green jersey points with the virtual leader now, Andre Greipel, before we get to the finishing sprint in Rodez.
Well, it's been fairly constant, their tempo, Phil, since the start. They did 41.5 kilometers in the first hour of racing, 42 kilometers an hour in the second hour of racing, but they're now coming into the more difficult terrain. It's undulating from here all the way down towards the finishing line in Rodez, and that's when we'll see the average speed of these riders start to drop down below 40 kilometers an hour, and it's when the road really starts to get very, very difficult. And I suppose in cycling jargon, it's what you would call a very heavy road.
Long straight roads are often very painful when, especially in conditions like this. But once they get into the hills and we change departments into the Aveyron, which is where Rodez is the capital town of that department, then they will also get into the trees a little bit, and so it might cool them down. They've got themselves, picked themselves up. It was getting below the slowest expected time, but they've now moved up, well up into an average speed of just on 42 kilometers an hour. So they're keeping these boys well within sight. 4:06 represents 4:07, the highest these boys have had, as Nathan Haas is requesting his team car here, probably wants yet another bottle to drink from.
Yeah, important on a day like this, Phil, because of this incredible temperature, 34, 35 degrees Celsius for the riders. It's important to keep topped up with liquid. They'll probably get through anything between 15 and 20 bottles on a stage like this. Obviously, they're not going to ingest the majority of that, but a lot of it gets poured over the head just to try and keep the core body temperature down, especially on days like this.
Most experienced man in the breakaway is Cyril Gauthier, who's ridden the Tour on well, this will be his 6th Tour.
Well, it's crept up again to the 4-minute margin. One man who will enjoy these conditions is the rider just sitting at the back there, number 163, Nathan Haas. He's a prolific winner, but he's also one of those rare riders who has the ability to get quite well over the climbs and produce a good sprint down towards the end. He turned professional back in 2010, but it was really in 2012 when he came across to the Garmin team, which is basically the same formation that he's in now under a different name, and he finished in 2nd place in the Tour of Britain. But towards the end of last year, he won the Japan Cup for the 2nd time. But as I said, he's one of those riders who is able to get over the climbs and still produce a sprint, so he would be quite a tip if this breakaway was to succeed and stay clear. But somehow in the back of my mind, I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, it's got its biggest advantage since we began, Paul. 4 minutes 8 seconds at the moment.
Yes, the rider's now heading down to the magnificent town of Albi. It really is a phenomenal place there, 12th to 13th century, and you're looking down there on an incredible cathedral, the Cathedral of Saint-Cécile, and in fact it's regarded as being one of the largest brick buildings in the world. It's made out of red brick from the clay from around this area, and it is really quite a phenomenal structure.
And that's overlooking the beautiful River Tarn there, and all of the red buildings. You know now that you're in the department of the Tarn. Many holidaymakers visit this area every year. It's away from the Pyrenees. It's a very special part of France.
It's a fabulous building. To think that it's actually just made out of brick, and that's a clock tower. You can see there the bell tower is 78 meters high, which is around about 230 feet.
Well, it's a good time to test the superior knowledge of Jens Voigt, our co-commentator this year. Jens, yesterday you told us the breakaway would get caught. It didn't. How about these boys?
Well, I guess you put my reputation on the line here, so I better get this one right. But yeah, since you already see that John Degenkolb's team is chasing in the hope that John Degenkolb might finish it off with a stage win, I give him a very little chance.
Yeah, the only thing that I was just thinking, Jens, is with Giant Alpecin, they're really a team that's been built for the flatlands, and we're going into the most difficult part of today's stage. Do they have the firepower, you think, to do this on their own? Or I think they would be much happier if another team came forward to give them some help.
I couldn't agree more, because I had some similar thoughts already. If you want to chase down 6-rider breakaway, you need to invest at least 4 riders, maybe 5 from your team to chase them down. That means you already have 4 or 5 guys pretty much tired when they hit the hilly section in the second half. So there's not much of a lead out left for John. So he must either save some of his men, or he must go all in for himself. So absolutely, they are looking for some help, but I'm not sure if they're going to get much help today.
I think you're right, Jens. At the moment, they're letting them fry in what is becoming a very hot sun here. They're going to get a view of the River Tarn coursing through Albi in a moment or two. It's 235 mile long, and I reckon they'd like a swim.
Yeah, they would, but we've said it's really the heat which is making this stage very difficult today, and it's one of those days when you've got to really keep concentrated. But I think the Tour de France over the last couple of years has also done a pretty impressive job of shortening the stages, so the riders are not too concerned of working hard throughout the full length of the stage. A chance to have a quick look in here at the speeds. Perichon, who's in the breakaway, riding along at just inside of 42 kilometers an hour. Albert Timmer, who rides for Giant Alpecin, is on the front end of the main field. His speed there given at 24 kilometers an hour. Well, the difference is because the breakaway group have gone over the top of this little ripple, so they're still riding at quite a high speed. And as you can see, Giant Alpecin are riding on the early slopes of this climb. They're now starting to climb up, and as we move away from the Tarn, we will drop into the next department of the day, and that of course is the department of the Aveyron.
5 minutes, it's unknown territory. They haven't been there before today.
Well, we're looking now probably at about 2 hours to go to the finish. I just caught a quick spot there of Team Lotto's car coming to the front, so having a quick word with the teammate of Andre Greipel. Interesting that Lotto managed to put a man into the breakaway, because they really wanted a big breakaway today, because I think they feel that maybe today's stage isn't suited to their man Andre Greipel, who Greg Henderson, the New Zealander who was in this race early on, said he felt that Andre Greipel was in the best form of his life.
Well, I think he's right. Well, you can see there's not much rain around here, though we got plenty of it yesterday afternoon in the High Pyrenees. Hailstones indeed broke the hot temperatures of the day there. But there's no chance of that happening here. We're a lot lower now. We don't go very high all day today, looking at only around 600 meters as a high spot of the day.
Well, it gives you an indication there, Phil, of just how hot it is for the riders. A nice little lump of ice going down the back of the racing jersey there for Pierre-Luc Perichon. And they are hot days in this part of France. I just remember from when I was racing how difficult it was on days like this. And a number of riders, there's plenty of riders do not like these weather conditions, but I'm quite sure Chris Froome has no fear at all. Born in Nairobi, used to hot conditions, but so too Alberto Contador said that one of the things that really slowed him down a fraction yesterday was the weather conditions. He prefers it to be hot and hard, and I'm sure that that's what he's expecting to use over the next couple of days, to maybe see one or two of the other riders in this race start to weaken and not recover well from these hot days of racing.
But for the Africans, of course, basically the hot weather for them is December, January, February, March, and here we are in July. It can be quite chilly in Johannesburg in July, Paul.
Well, it's a long way further south than Uganda. It's pretty much the same temperature throughout the year on the equator, up to 36 degrees Celsius during the middle of the afternoon, cooling down quite pleasantly to 15 and 16 degrees Celsius at night, and that's the difficult thing about France and this southern part of Europe, Phil, because it actually doesn't cool down at night, and plenty of the hotels of the riders have a hard time actually sleeping because of that heat.
Another nice view of the Tarn there. It tips out into the Garonne, by the way, which eventually puts it into the Atlantic Ocean during its journey of 235 miles.
And we got no indication as why Nathan Haas was just a little bit off the back end of the group, but he too, using the referee's car, back onto the tail of the group. Ambielle, and this is the back end of the main field. Just the length of the main field there just gives us that little bit of an indication as to how difficult today's stage is. It's interesting to see that one rider from Tinkoff Saxo has come up to the front, so I wonder if the nod has been given from the Tinkoff Saxo management team to say, look, we'll put a guy in front here because this could be a day for Peter Sagan. And as you can see, I think they've actually turned it up a little bit. They're getting a slight crosswind from the left-hand shoulders, and that will make it difficult, especially for the riders at the back end of that line now. All of a sudden, somebody's decided to put up the spinnaker, I think, here this afternoon,
wow,
Phil, because this is full speed ahead.
The wind is at the back as they go through the harvested fields here, and the pressure has gone on. And look at this, Paul, they found some allies on Giant Alpecin. It looks as though it's coming from Contador's team.
Yeah, but the other thing as well is, Phil, they've just picked up a nasty little crosswind. This is Daniel Tekla-Heimanot at the back of the group, enjoying his first participation for Eritrea in the Tour de France, and of course a fair amount of success for him in the early days of the Tour when he was in fact the wearer of the King of the Mountains jersey. Quite an honour for him, I have to say.
He's on the wheel of his teammate there from the UK, which is Steve Cummings. I think Daniel's finding a little bit hard into this second week of the Tour, but he's hoping to recover and have a go. This is it now, 4:01, and the pressure has suddenly shot on here. It's not as much as a race to test everybody in the peloton.
Well, quite interesting, Phil, because just looking at Tinkoff Saxo coming to the front of the group there, I was talking to Sean Yates this morning, who's the team manager of Tinkoff Saxo. He's a very good mate of mine. He's been a mate for many, many years, but he was very cagey about what Tinkoff Saxo were going to do today. He felt that it was going to be a day where they would sit back and see just how the race unfolded. He actually thought that the breakaway would succeed, which I thought was a little bit of a negative thought for a man who I feel has probably got the winner in his ranks, but now I think he's obviously changed his tune as he started to send the riders from Tinkoff Saxo to the front, and this has got to be not for Alberto Contador today but for Peter Sagan.
Well, they've realised now on the count back that in fact Sagan has lost his green jersey on the road today by a point to Andre Greipel. Now the nature of the finish, it's not for Andre Greipel, but it could well be for Peter Sagan, so they've decided to help out Alpecin to see what they can do. They break away. We're going through undulations all day now. We have quite a plunge down, and then we will climb back up. We go down to 200 meters before we start to climb up to 420 meters for the third category climb, which is the first hill of the day, the Côte de Saint-Cergue, and they're anxious to get on with it here now.
Well, they are. In fact, the fact that the main field has seen that change in colour at the front to be black and white and yellow now means that we're going to have a very hard, serious chase dropping down into this cirque. A couple of other teams are moving up towards the front. Well, a complete change in attitude at the front end of the main field now as we get into the last 2 hours of racing, and it's a question now of whether or not Peter Sagan can get himself the stage victory on today. He's out on the road. He's currently lost his lead in the green jersey points competition, but he'll certainly be looking to try and get that back in the final sprint of the day, and a sprint finish that I really believe suits his abilities.
Well, this is Valgren here, who is travelling at 45 miles an hour.
Yes, he certainly is, and I think we'll start to see that clock at the top there begin to change now as they take a serious interest in the finish of the stage today. Tomorrow is a difficult stage for the sprinters, because tomorrow finishes are back up on the outskirts of Mende. Valgren is the rider on the front from Tinkoff. There you get a chance to see the beautiful meandering river Tarn right down there. It moves around. It's almost an oxbow as it goes around there. It's just about joined in the middle. And just down in there, there's a fabulous old priory called the Priory of Notre-Dame de l'Ordre. As you can see, the little meander of the River Tarn. It's around about 3 kilometers that whole way around there. And the little village you can just see perched right at the start is the village of Ambiolet. And the riders will drop down there and they go across the bridge, across the River Tarn in a few moments' time. Well, it is interesting to see that it hasn't started to have an impact on the advantage yet, but I think it will in a few moments' time. There's Michael Rogers coming up to the front as well, a little bit further back, Rafael Majka. He's already won himself a stage, and looking after TJ Van Garderen. That's Van Garderen sitting in the middle there, in the middle of the two other riders from BMC Racing. I have to say, Van Garderen looking very, very comfortable up in his second place in the overall standings.
Well, in the beauty of the area around the Tarn Gorges now, the peloton has got the break back to 3:51, but it's not. They're not running at it. And the 6 leaders rather are on the climb. But you see, the climb here and the heat is going to make it very painful at the back of the peloton.
Well, it brings back some painful memories as well to me, Phil, because racing on these roads, I think it is an interesting thing to remember just how heavy these roads are, and you can see the sort of damage that's being done. And all of a sudden there's a couple of riders from Giant Alpecin slipping backwards there. In fact, there's a couple of riders from IAM Cycling also slipping towards the back, and this is all because of the pressure that's being done. We're heading into the lumpy part of today's stage, and really just on the horizon, when they cross over the River Tarn here, they will hit the first climb of the day. It's a nasty little climb as well. It's a 3rd category climb, the Côte de Saint-Cyr.
I was a bit surprised there, Paul. It looked to me as though Raimondas Navadauskas was going off the back, and he won in Bergerac last year, 2014, and clearly not having a good day in the sun. There you can see the climb now. It's a long one. First 2 riders count in the King of the Mountains. 2 points for the win, 1 point for second. Nobody up front affecting the lead of Chris Froome in that competition, who is ahead now after yesterday's victory of Joaquim Rodriguez, who wears the polka dot jersey.
But just look what this lumpy part of the course has done to the gap. It's down to 3 1/4 minutes. You can see a little bit more of urgency in the pedaling style of these riders. Nathan Haas on the left-hand side with his shirt open from Cannondale Garmin. He will enjoy the lumpy nature of today's stage, but it's also good to see Kelderman coming forward, a rider who I think has got a very good future ahead of him. And we're seeing the average of the stage, the average of the third hour of the stage, 42 kilometers an hour.
Well, that's a pretty to the top of this first climb of 3 now as we make our way towards Rodez. Watch out for Thomas de Gent. He's the rider in the red jersey. He won the sprint at La Bouterie.
Man in the breakaway for a majority of yesterday's stage, paying for his efforts there, Sepp van Mark.
Yeah, he was conquering the Pyrenees, but he can't conquer this small hill in the Tarn at the moment.
Just goes to show, Phil, how difficult it is to recover in the Tour de France from an effort like that. And these are not the great kind of days to be able to sit in the main field and try and hide, because they're so hard, these climbs, and they're made much harder by the fact that the temperature is really quite exhausting today at 34, 35 degrees Celsius.
Ken van Bilsen at the back. We saw him in a long breakaway with Pierrick Fedrigo before we came down to the Pyrenees. Now they've corrected that now. I thought it was a bit fast for the average speed for the stage. It's 41.8 kilometers an hour.
Another rider struggling at the back of the group was the MTN Quebec rider Tyler Farrer. He will not be too keen on this kind of a race profile this afternoon, but I do think he's got a teammate in with a chance of a victory, and that of course that is Edvald Bosenhagen. He likes hot conditions like this, and he also likes these very heavy stages.
Well, I have to say that these boys are more than holding their own just now. Now we've got into the hills, which will take us into the next department of Aveyron. They're holding it at 3:51. And every pedal rev, as Geniez gets towards his hometown, he'll know these roads. He'll have spent many hours training in these areas. Dark, wet days, thinking of one day he might be able to ride a stage of the Tour de France into his hometown of Rodez. And that day is today.
Haas looks over his shoulder, just trying to ascertain what the gap is like between himself and everybody else in this breakaway situation. He looks back, he wants to know if they're chasing hard. His gap is only 10 seconds, but Haas had a very good ride in April of this year when he finished 5th overall in the Circuit de la Sarthe. And I'm just looking down at the 5 chasers now, 10 to 12 seconds. Well, just a few moments ago, we've just seen a very dramatic attack come from Nathan Haas. We're inside of 20 kilometers to go. And now the 5 chasers, well, they're slowly starting to eat into his advantage. I think they will pull him back. We're just looking here at a last-minute move there by Nathan Haas. Haas jumped away about 2 or 3 kilometers ago. He built up a lead of about 10 to 15 seconds, but now the group behind, the 5 chasers, are getting themselves organised and pulling the Australian back into the fold. But I think very shortly we'll see again a 6-man leading group, and they are still holding on to a 1 minute and 45-second advantage over the main field. But Nathan Haas now, he realises it didn't work on this occasion, and he's about to get caught by everybody else. But what I think his attack will do, it will take out the organisation from the leading group, who, after all, for the last few hours of the race have worked together as a band of brothers with one aim, and that's to stay away from the main field. 1 minute 47 seconds at the 20 kilometre to go banner. Now looking at these riders who are back together again. Geniez is the rider there, number 25. Thomas de Kent in the red jersey having a drink. Cyril Gauthier in the dark green jersey of Europe Car. Wilco Kelderman in the yellow jersey at the front there of Lotto Jumbo. Nathan Haas has been caught. He's in the green jersey of Cannondale Garmin. And Pierre-Luc Perrichon of Bretagne Sèche Environnement. To see now whether they get themselves organised again. Thomas de Kent has just put a little bit of pressure on, and they've opened up a small advantage over Perrichon, but they're now just going slightly downhill, and they will now they've got a little bit of a valley road to ride, and then they'll start to climb up, and it's quite a long ascent for around about 5 kilometres, and this is probably the toughest part of the second half of the course here this afternoon. But that attack, I think, by Nathan Haas will all of a sudden make a lot of the other riders think in the back of their mind they've got to now start to think about a stage victory. Tinkoff Saxo over the last few kilometres have had quite a few number of riders come to the front, really start to apply the pressure, and always hovering there you can see Peter Sagan in that dark green jersey. We've seen that the man who is actually on the road leading the green jersey points competition, Andre Greipel, well, he's been dropped and left behind because of the severity of the undulations on today's stage. Advantage then at the moment going back to Peter Sagan, who currently has a 1-point deficit over Andre Greipel, but this is certainly the kind of finish that suits Peter Sagan. The other rider who is a little bit isolated now because his team have done the majority of the pacemaking since the very start, John Degenkolb. He'll be looking for a victory this afternoon. He's lost 4 teammates after they did a lot of work to prevent this breakaway group getting too much of an advantage. But the temperature and the thermometer continues to rise. 35 degrees Celsius. That's pretty close to 97, 98 degrees Fahrenheit. Nathan Haas, 163, made that move, but he never really was able to break the stranglehold of the group that he was with. So, continues to drop down as we can see they are getting themselves organised. They know they need to collaborate if they have a chance to survive.
Well, now we're at 1 minute and 30 seconds, just going inside that pole. We're on the climb now up to the highest point of the course. It's not categorised, but they've got to get over it.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, Phil, what they do need to do, though, is to collaborate right now, because I'm getting a computer prediction that the leaders will get caught at 6.3 kilometres to go. That's about 4 miles from the finish, and they're heading now right into this valley, and for me, this is probably one of the hardest parts. We're looking at the beautiful Valley de Vior, and the riders are charging down this, but they're going to reach very soon the highest point of today's stage, and I think we'll see a certain amount of damage being done in the main field behind.
Well, they're going to be pretty pleased about the forest here, just putting a shadow across them and cutting down the heat a little bit. It looks like we've got Daniel Tekla-Hymanot has got himself onto the front now. He looked to be in trouble earlier in the day.
Well, he did, but I think we're starting to see the nod of the riders who can sprint but get over the climbs, and the rider who can sprint and get over the climbs from MTN Quebec is Edvald Bosenhagen. They've seen a lot of work being done by the team of Peter Sagan. They've been up to the front, and again a chance here to look at this fantastic abbey just down in the bottom there. This is the Abbey of Boncon. It was a Cistercian abbey which was originally founded back in 1162.
Well, these boys who've got no interest in that, of course, they're now getting very concerned about whether they will stay away or not. 1:22. They're going to have to start thinking soon of moving out those team cars, which will provide an attraction for the race behind and leave the void between break and peloton. They're just hanging on now, Paul.
Well, they are, Phil, and unfortunately I would have to tell them that as they start to make their way deeper into the valley of Vior, which is where we're meandering up at the moment, we're going upstream, and it's a stream that in fact is 168 kilometers in length, but they are going to go up to the high spot of today's stage, and you can start to see the damage that's been done because of the toughness. And one man who's had a really difficult day at the office this afternoon is here, number 11, Jean-Christophe Perrault, was second overall in the Tour de France last year. He's bandaged on the left, he's bandaged on the right, probably bandaged down the middle as well, but he's still hanging tough and he's still staying in contact with the main field.
20 kilometres to go. Nathan Haas was in the lead at 15 kilometres to go. He is now back in this leading group of 6, and now they're going to freewheel downhill before they start the climb up to the top. Difficult moment. Take another look at the Bonnecombe Abbey here, which is absolutely stunning. This is a very pretty part of this amazing country of France.
Well, you'd be happy to know, Phil, that the Trappist monks, in fact, restored that in 1876 after it was badly damaged during the French Revolution.
Looks like Michael Rogers has come back to the front. Svein Tufte's just behind. We've got one of the Yateses also coming into here, and I'm going to make a plug. I think it's Simon Yates who's also coming up towards the front now.
Well, if it wasn't Simon Yates, I'm sure his mum will be on the phone to give us a correction afterwards. Let's not forget, identical twins, as we see just struggling a little bit at the back. Ian Stannard, he's done a lot of pacemaking. He did a tough job of work yesterday for the team. He's a big rider, number 38 at the back for Team Sky. It's all about this now, and as we start to see Thomas de Kent just having a quick look across at his compatriots in the breakaway to say, have you got the legs to come with me?
It's a little bit sad, but it's the way of the sport that a man from Canberra heads up the chase to the man from Canberra who's in the breakaway. Nathan Haas, that's where he lives these days, and Michael Rogers at the front, that's where he hails from in Australia.
Well, Geniez in the red, white and blue of France, and FDJ, he's in difficulty. He knows this climb better than anybody in the breakaway because he was born just down the road at the finish line.
Probably why he's being dropped. He knows what's to come.
Well, he's right, Phil, because this is still a very long incline. It's around about 4 kilometres till they get to the town of La Mouline.
Well, as the flurry attacks are starting here now, this is Kelderman having a dig this time. Gautier, the most experienced man, is now sprinting across. Thomas de Gent, who's pretty strong in the climbs. He can't catch the wheel of Gautier, though. Might get a couple of riders clear here.
Well, Thomas de Kent, the big turbo engine that man has got. We've seen him do so much pacemaking on the flat stages, and that on those occasions it was to look after the interests of his teammate Andre Greipel. Here he's hoping to get his own victory, but now we're starting to see a two-man leading group form.
It's always difficult to understand why the referees or the judges or the organisers didn't put King of the Mountains points on this climb, and that's why so often it does crack the riders. They're not expecting to be quite so hard. No prize at the top. It was well worth a third category tag. Kelderman, though, is making his bid here, and Gautier, who is the Europe car Frenchman, very experienced, has quickly got onto his wheel. 1:04 the gap.
Well, unfortunately, Phil.
Where are we now? This is Rodriguez back here. So that's the man who won yesterday, decided this isn't to be his finish today.
Well, not a surprise, Phil. Bear in mind, tomorrow is a kind of finish for Joaquim Rodriguez. It finishes in Mende. He won there the last time where we had a race finish up there, beating a certain Alberto Contador. I think he's sitting up just to try and recover from his efforts of yesterday. But Thomas de Kent is digging very, very deep here to come back. Well done, Thomas. 3 men now in the lead.
And if you notice, Jean-Christophe Perrault has stayed in the bunch when the man that won yesterday has lost contact.
And because of this flurry of activity now from the leading group of 6, which has been reduced to 3 men, the gap has stretched out just by a few seconds. This is the long climb now. Once they get over the top of there, we'll begin the drop down into the outskirts of Rodez. And if they can go over the top of the climb with the 1 minute and 8 seconds, they may well create a little bit of a surprise. But there's a lot of different teams now, Phil, very happy to throw it all in on this final climb of the day.
And this is Simon Yates on the front at the moment as he continues to set the pace, trying to keep an eye on Michael Matthews. Adam Yates is up here as well, so if they can just hold this race, we might have a surprise victory. But on the other hand, these 3 now getting back together, got to be totally committed. They can't wait to see who's going to win. They've got to help each other here. 63 seconds the spread.
Well, it's quite funny when you've been in a breakaway for a long time with 6 riders, then all of a sudden it gets reduced in numbers to 3. You realise as your chances have increased of winning the stage, and you're reinvigorated, and they'll be a lot happier now to try and collaborate to see if they can survive. And the gap all of a sudden has stopped coming down. It's 1:04. It's not tumbling the way it was a few moments ago.
Off the back has gone Richie Porte, dropped by the peloton. Off the back has gone Michael Rogers. Off the back has gone the man who won earlier, Rafael Majka, on his first day in the mountains. All feeling the pressure of the day on this little climb.
Well, Phil, that just gives a reflection of how difficult these so-called transitional stages, as the French like to call them, can be, because of the heat, because of the road surface, and of course because of the rather dramatic average speed we've seen today. It's in excess of 42 kilometers now. That's 26 miles an hour over roads like this, and I can tell you from experience, they are not flat.
Well, this was a tough climb. There's the flag of Ireland there, and I must say the organisers have fooled the peloton here by not giving a King of the Mountains points, and it's really hurt them. Those that didn't know this course, it will have caught them for sure as they drag the way up to the top before they start the plunge down into Rodez. They can't argue, it was shown on the contour of the day's race route.
Yes, they all knew what it was like, and they all know that it's a very nasty uphill finish into the town of Rodez. It's a beautiful town, Rodez, medieval in its history, with the cathedral perch right on the top. When they get over the top of this climb, Phil, they will be able to see Rodez in the background, but if they look over their shoulders, they will also see the bubbling mass of the main field boring down upon them. 102, 101, that corresponds on this slope to around about 750 meters, the distance between the two.
Desperate moments by the Tour first timer here, Wilco Kelderman, but he is a very classy bike rider for the future in yellow there. Cyril Gauthier trying to hold them together, and Thomas de Gendt always in silence, just gets on with his job. 3 good strong riders here. 59 seconds, goes back up to 1 minute, 11.6 kilometers to go.
Yeah, but Phil, as a ex-professional bike rider, the one thing that I have always hated is going up a climb that doesn't have a descent immediately afterwards, and this climb is just exactly like that, because once they go over the top of the climb, it's a little bit of a false flat for another couple of kilometers.
Well, I'm now hearing that Simon Yates has been dropped now at the back of the peloton. Don't forget our rest day is coming after the weekend as well. That's on Tuesday this week. 35 seconds, and Geschke is trying to finish it off here in time to see if he can get his teammate John Degenkolb. 40 seconds they're showing, that's better. We'll give him a 5-second advantage. 7 kilometers to go, Paul. We're going to drop down before we hit the wall up to the finish.
Well, let's hope that these 3 riders don't hit the wall, because in terms of professional cycling, that's something you really don't want to do. It's running out of energy, running out of glucose, as Thomas de Gendt just drops off a little bit as they go around that corner. But look at the power of de Gendt. He gets that little bit of a bigger gear in and claws his way back up, gets really low on his machine, searches a little bit of aerodynamics to get back onto the group and reform. But once they start looking over their shoulders, Phil, they will see the big mass of the main field. Here it is, all over the road, and now everyone's starting to get nervous. Degenkolb is still there. He knows this is a sort of finish for him, but for me, I've just got a funny feeling in the back of my mind that after all of these attempts to get himself the victory, Peter Sagan will be looking to rack up #1 of this year.
Well, he's going to have to hunt and freelance because his team are running out of firepower. They're living in hope, those 3 riders up front now. And the strength of Wilco Kelderman, he's only just 24 years of age. He's in his first Tour de France. He really is showing some power in this move. He's the rider coming into our picture in yellow. if these three are all looking strong at the moment, and we've got the very confusing finish. I'm not too sure they will get caught at 5.7.
It's going to be very, very difficult for them to stay off the front, because 30 seconds at these speeds is not very much more than about 450 meters. But the strange thing is, at the main field, Phil, they can almost reach out and touch those riders in front. And I'm just having a quick look down there and seeing a FDJ coming up on the left-hand side. Now, it may well be that their sprinter Arnaud Démare has survived on a day like this. You can see the MTN Qhubeka squad at the front in the black and white jerseys, and I'm looking down, well, there it is over on the right hand side. Right on the wheel of Peter Sagan is Edvald Boasson-Hagen.
Well, Mark Cavendish has said normally it's not a sprint for him. It's a very confusing sprint. It's technical, but he says he has won on a hill steeper than this before, and we know that's to be true. And he's right there at the front of that peloton. And they've taken out some of the traffic islands here to give these riders a clear run into the centre, but there are plenty of more to confuse them as we go down. We're now running down to the start of the climb, 4.7 kilometres to go.
Well, funny thing, Phil, is we've mentioned a couple of times when people have said Mark Cavendish does not have any chance at all, and I'm thinking about a stage finish into Aubenas a couple of years ago. They said, well, there's a second category climb before the end, we'll get rid of Mark Cavendish. Guess what? They didn't do it on that occasion.
4 kilometres to go, 5 kilometres to go, I'm sorry, as they went under the banner there, and the peloton are chasing at 24 seconds at the 5 kilometre mark. These three riders in the lead have been ahead of the race literally since the flag was pulled in to give the start at Murray. They've led the whole way.
Well, we're now looking for the next banner to indicate 4 kilometres to go, and it's a very, very high speed now as they go around. They are soon, Phil, about to pick up the downhill section of the course. It could be very, very close, and it could go down to the last 500 or 600 metres.
This is a very, very hairy descent now as they dodge the way down. They go right to the basement. You'll see the roads flying over the viaducts above as the peloton are under 4 to go now.
At these speeds, Phil, that 4 kilometres today is not going to take them very much more than 4 minutes and 20 seconds or so. Peter Sagan was comfortably sitting up at the front end of the main field. There are so many of the big names who are looking to get themselves an open account this afternoon. Kelderman now leads them down the decision. They shouldn't lose very much time at all here as Kelderman gets into that low-profile decision. He's getting now relayed by the rider in the dark green. That is Gauthier.
3 kilometres to go, Jens. They're hanging on in there. What do you think now?
Yeah, but a bigger road in the valley, it's always in favor of the peloton, because the peloton just rolls faster with so many people in there. It's getting closer second by second. I'm afraid they're just gonna manage to catch them right on the bottom of the climb, basically underneath the 1 kilometer mark. Unfortunately, after all that hard work.
Well, they've got 19 seconds. They go under that 3 kilometres to go banner. The peloton, it twists and turns now as they continue to race down here. MTN Qhubeka are confident. Boasson-Hagen can sprint away from the pack.
Well, the racer radio is telling me it's 15 seconds the gap between these three and the front end of the main field, and they are really stretching it out now into a long line in the peloton. You can see the green jersey with the yellow helmet on it there of Peter Sagan. He's hovering around, he's waiting for the opportunity. He's been waiting since 2013 to get himself a stage victory.
2 kilometres we've gone under now. The peloton are at 15 seconds. They are absolutely flying downhill here. We'll be doing speeds of 70, 75 kilometres an hour. Will hit the climb that brings them to the finishing line. Wilco Kelderman flicks his arm. Come on and give me a hand here. These are desperate moments. They're getting tired.
I'll tell you one thing, Phil, if it was flat from here to the finish, I would give the advantage to these three men. But, well, there's a problem at the back.
That's Bauke Mollema, I think.
It looks as if Bauke Mollema has got himself a flat tyre. You can see MTN Qhubeka riders under the 2 kilometre to go flag are disappearing. We're now starting to see Katusha come to the front. Not too far, there he is in the green jersey there. In fact, it looks as if Michael Matthews in the white is now, Phil, starting to mix it up.
He's got the wheel of Mark Cavendish, can you believe? The man who is riding injured has now said he feels better. He's got the wheel of Mark Cavendish. Also, Kristoff is coming up too. Alexander Kristoff. We'd almost forgotten he was in the Tour de France. As they now come 1.2 kilometres to go.
Well, that, Phil, was a phenomenon. There's the yellow jersey crossing the line. Vincenzo Nibali. There are a few gaps in the field tonight as well. TJ Van Garderen has come across the line. But how about this? A little climb up to the finish in Rodez, and there are time gaps in the main field.
Desperate moments now. Feel sorry for that breakaway. They led for the whole race distance except the last 200 metres.
Well, that was a phenomenal run up towards the finishing line. A little bit further back, well, we've gone back to look at the hero of the day. That's Nathan Haas. He's going to ride up to the finishing line with JC Perrault. Perrault, well, he'll have a story to tell us all, but look at this, a great explosive lunge for the line there by the man on the right-hand side of BMC, and that is Greg Van Avermaet. But Peter Sagan, second place again for Peter Sagan, but he will retake the lead in the green jersey points competition. But this was certainly a great finish for Greg Van Avermaet. There we go, there's a chance to have a quick look at that as they come up towards the finishing line. And in fact, I have a feeling that is Jan Bakelands getting across the line in third place. There is the cathedral I was telling you about just a little bit earlier on. The beautiful Cathedral of Notre Dame, or Our Lady of Rodez. So, Van Avermaet, Bakelands, John Degenkolb in fourth position, Martens in fifth, and Chris Froome in sixth place. Nibali, Contador and Valverde, some big names are all the way up there, and we can see there's one or two riders coming across the line. That's Michael Schär coming across the line for BMC. Big smile all over his face. Oh, Tony Galopin was 11th, Nairo Quintana 12th, Robert Hessink 13th. All of the big names were keeping a very close eye on each other up towards the line there, all given the same time, but a gap of 3 seconds between Van Avermaet, Peter Sagan and Jan Bakelands, and 7 seconds back to John Degenkolb. What a very difficult finish that was here in Rodez. Just couldn't quite get over Greg Van Avermaet. What a fantastic finish that was, and a little climb in the middle of the Avirons had all of the main contenders, Phil, keeping a very close eye on each other.
It was a super sprint finish. You've got to feel sorry for the boys that got caught in sight of the line, but the sprinters really kept themselves intact. And at the end of the day, it's a very special guy who's tried so long here to do well in the Tour de France. Greg Van Avermaet gets the victory for Team BMC.
Yeah, well, Greg Van Avermaet, Phil, he was looking at trying to get a victory at the summit of the Mur de Huy. He ran out a little bit on that occasion, but then all of a sudden this climb really suited him to perfection. Not quite as long and as hard as the Mur de Huy, but certainly he is a very explosive bike rider. That's win number 4 of the season for him, and I think he will mark that down as the one that he's really enjoyed.
Bet your life it's his first ever winner stage of the Tour de France, and he's had 3 attempts at the Tour.
Well, lots of Flemish being nattered there to Greg Van Avermaet. That'll be his 26th win, but I think, you know, when you think about the number of times he's been close to a very big victory, he's going to be very happy with that, and it just adds to a little bit of less pressure on the shoulders of TJ Van Garderen, who, let's not forget, is still sitting very comfortably in second place in the overall standings. Van Garderen, Phil, crossed the line in 10th place, but 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th. Look at this. Chris Froome, Nibali, Contador, Valverde, Van Garderen. Wow.
And still coming up the climb, the French hero of the day, second in the Tour de France last year. He's finishing the stage now with Nathan Haas, who's still all smiles, having been in that breakaway. And Jean-Christophe Perrault is coming home, and he lives to fight another day. And I must say, when he fell, it looked as though his tour was about to end. What a terrific display of courage by Jean-Christophe Perrault.
Certainly made a tough stuff, the man wearing number 11. He would have been forgiven, I think, Phil, for abandoning at the side of the road, but it just goes. But that was the crash that he had early on. It was a really tough crash. He rolled over a couple of times. He was the only rider to go down. And when I saw him, and when I saw the doctor looking after him, I thought, well, that's it. He's out, as he was a couple of years ago when he crashed with a broken collarbone in the individual time trial and didn't finish stage 17.
Well, Rodez, it's only our second ever finish here. It's been a great finish. I don't know why we've never come here before more often, because that was a wonderful end from a sporting point of view, but from a competitive point of view, what a sad end for the three boys up front. They almost made it. Shades of Jack Bauer into Nîmes, the Kiwi who was caught last year just before the line after a long breakaway.
Yeah, it was almost Jack Bauer revisited there with those guys getting caught so close to the finish.
Chance to look at the church there, which you can see for a long way away. The peloton coming in there, this bunch 12 minutes down.
It's Adam Hansen coming in, and here's a chance to see it. I have to say that Peter Sagan waited and waited and waited, but he just couldn't quite come up alongside Greg Van Avermaet. It certainly was the kind of finish that suits Greg Van Avermaet. We've seen him win on slopes like this in the past this year. But I wonder if Peter Sagan just gave up a little bit, knowing that finishing in second place, it would give him a huge number of points in his quest to win that green jersey competition, Phil, and he's hoping to win that competition for a fourth year in succession.
He is, but he hasn't won a stage of the Tour since 2013. It was in Albi, by the way, which is we came round Albi with the race route today before we came up towards the finish here. Would have been a nice win. It would have been his fifth victory, but this man found a special pair of legs. He's no surprise, and he hung on, but it must have been a long way up that climb.
It was, but the smile all over the face of Greg Van Avermaet there, and congratulations coming from some of the other Belgians in the race there as they move away. That was Zdeněk Stybar who congratulated him there. Again, isn't it amazing how the cathedral here in the heart of Rodez is perched right on the highest spot of this little hill that would have become the centre of the town.
Well, tomorrow the race will see the cathedral again as we wave farewell on stage 14. Let's have a look at the result confirmed now with Sagan second, 3 seconds to Jan Backlands. Good result for him. 7 seconds, and the group then led home by John Degenkolb, Paul Martins, Chris Froome, Vincenzo Nibali, Alberto Contador. No sign, of course, of Andre Greipel, so he's lost his lead, which he had for half the day in the green jersey. TJ Van Garderen there completing the top 10. More importantly, no time gaps for the favourites. Sagan is back in the lead now with about 24 points over Greipel in that green jersey competition after winning the points on the line today. Froome, of course, his challenge remains in the polka dot jersey. He'll still be the leader of that, as he is also the leader of the race itself.